Welcome, pet parent. Thanks for pressing play. If Cozy Tales Stories helps your little one feel safe, please like and subscribe. New Cozy Tales stories are uploaded weekly. Now take a slow breath. You're not leaving them alone. I'll stay right here with them while you're away. And when you're ready, you can head out. Well then, little friend, your human is stepping out for a little while, but that's all right. I'm going to stay right here with you. We're going to spend some quiet time together. Maybe you'll curl up in your favorite cozy spot, the soft bed in the corner, or the rug by the door where you like to watch the room. Take your time getting settled. There's no hurry today. Then we'll listen to a gentle story together. Your parent will be back before you know it. Until then, I'll keep you company. Let's settle in and listen to our story together. Chapter 1. The Seaglass Wax Seal. Mara reached the harbor steps, just as the morning finished deciding what it wanted to be. The tide was low enough to show the dark green skin of the rocks, slick and shining, and high enough to keep the boats lifting gently on their lines. A mild wind moved through the rigging and made a quiet music, not sharp, not startling, only the kind of sound that belonged here. She paused at the top step and let the place greet her, salt and bread, tar and wet wood, a faint curl of citrus from somewhere down the lane, where a door had opened and closed again. The harbor always smelled like work and comfort at the same time. Mara adjusted the strap of her canvas bag and started down. Her boots touched each step with the steady rhythm she liked. The stone was worn smooth in the middle from years of feet, and the sides held little shells caught in the mortar, as if the sea had been quietly paying rent. At the bottom, she turned left toward the row of benches that faced the water. The benches were never empty, even when no one sat on them. They held yesterday's warmth in the grain. They held the shapes of conversations. They held the way a person could sit and watch the boats and feel less alone in their thoughts. Mara had come for errands, the kind she did without thinking now. A spool of twine from the chandlery, a small jar of marmalade from the grocer for a neighbor up the hill, a note she was meant to deliver to the fishmonger, folded carefully and sealed with a plain dot of wax. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy, just small lines of care moving through the town like a thread. She liked being that thread. She was halfway past the second bench when she noticed something new, where nothing new should be. A small parcel sat on the step beside the bench, tucked close to the stone, as if it knew how to be polite. It was not a box. It was not a bag. It was a neat bundle, wrapped in pale brown parcel paper, the sort used for careful things. The edges were folded with a practiced hand. A single piece of string crossed at once, tied in a flat knot, and on top, pressed into the paper like a quiet promise, was a spot of wax. Mara slowed. The wax was sea blue, not the bright blue of paint, but the softened blue of glass that had spent a long time being rolled and rubbed by waves until it forgot its sharpness. The seal was round and slightly irregular at the edge, like someone had poured it from a spoon and let it settle on its own. In the center was an impression, not a crest she recognized, not any official mark, just a simple shape, clean and certain, a small shell. Mara stood still long enough that a gull wandered closer, and then changed its mind and wandered away again. She did not touch the parcel yet. She only looked. There was no name on it, no address, no note tucked underneath. The paper was dry. Someone had placed it there this morning, while the harbor still felt like it belonged to early light. Mara glanced up the steps and down the lane. No one watched her. A man was rolling barrels toward the fish stalls, humming to himself. A woman with a basket of herbs moved toward the market street, her scarf fluttering. Farther out, a boat shifted and knocked softly against its neighbor. Everything looked normal. That, somehow, made the parcel feel more strange. Mara let her hand hover above it. She had grown up in a town where people left things for each other all the time. A loaf wrapped in cloth on a windowsill, a jar of soup on a doorstep, a pair of gloves hung on a gate, someone's way of saying, "I saw your hands were cold." But those gifts usually came with a name, or at least a familiar pattern, a certain ribbon, a certain basket, a habit. It carried only the wax seal and the small shell pressed into it, and the careful, quiet way it had been placed like it belonged to Mara. She lifted it. It was light, lighter than she expected, but not empty. The paper gave a soft whisper against her fingers. She turned it once, looking for any mark she had missed, any clue written small along an edge. Nothing. Mara stood with the parcel in her hands and felt a small curiosity settle into her chest, gentle as a cat curling on a lap. She could take it to the harbor office. She could set it back down and walk away. She could carry it to the post desk and ask if anyone had seen it. Or she could open it. Her errands could wait a little. The twine and marmalade would still be there. The fishmonger would still be behind his stall, pretending he did not like notes until he read them. Mara slipped the parcel into her canvas bag, careful not to crush the seal, and continued on. She did not rush. She did not linger either. She simply walked as she always did, as if the day had offered her one more thing to hold, and she had agreed. The chandlery was a narrow shop with rope coiled like sleeping snakes along the wall, and brass hooks that gleamed even in dim light. The owner, a woman named Lenny, nodded when Mara came in. "Morning," Lenny said. "Morning," Mara answered, and found the spool of twine she needed. Lenny wrapped it in paper and tied it with a quickness that came from years of the same motions. "You're out early," she said. Mara smiled. "It's the harbor. It pulls me." "It pulls everyone," Lenny said, and slid the spool across the counter. "Anything else?" Mara shook her head. She paid, tucked the twine away, and stepped back out into the lane. From there she crossed to the grocer's and chose a jar of marmalade from the shelf that caught the light. The label was handwritten, the oranges drawn with a simple charm. The grocer, Mr. Hal, wrapped it for her with a bit of straw to keep the glass safe. When Mara left, the bag felt nicely weighted with useful things, and somewhere near the bottom, the small parcel waited like a secret. She walked a little farther, delivering the note to the fishmonger with a polite exchange and a grin that made him pretend to scowl. Then she turned toward her favorite path, the one that followed the edge of the harbor until the buildings thinned and the air opened. There was a small shed on that path, half tool room and half shelter, where people sometimes waited out a drizzle or sat to mend nets. The door was often open, and inside there was a bench and a table that smelled faintly of pine pitch. Mara liked the shed because it was quiet without being lonely. She stepped inside, set her bag on the table, and sat. The light through the doorway fell across the boards in a long, pale stripe. Outside, the harbor sound softened, as if the shed took them and made them kinder. Mara reached into her bag and drew out the parcel. Up close, the wax seal was even prettier. It held a slight translucence at the edge, and within it were tiny bubbles like trapped sea foam. The shell impression was crisp, 5 small ridges, a gentle curve. Whoever had made it had pressed the seal with care, not too hard, not too light. Mara ran her thumb along the edge of the wax, without breaking it. She had seen wax seals before, mostly in old letters that people kept in drawers, and in a few fanciful invitations from townsfolk who liked a bit of drama. But this was different. This wax looked like it belonged to the sea. She untied the string, the knot released easily, which told her it had been tied by someone practiced, someone who knew the right amount of tension. She unfolded the parcel paper, lifting each flap in turn. Inside, wrapped in a second layer of thinner paper, was something small and hard. Mara peeled back the inner paper and found a piece of sea glass. It was the same softened blue as the wax, but paler at the center, like a drop of sky that had drifted down and forgotten it was meant to be bright. The edges were rounded. One side had a faint curve, as if it had once been part of a bottle or a window pane. The sea glass sat in her palm with a quiet weight. Under it was a folded letter. The paper of the letter was cream, thick enough to hold ink without bleeding. It had been folded in thirds and pressed flat. And along the outside was another seal, smaller than the one on the parcel, made from the same sea blue wax. The shell impression sat in its center again. Mara's breath went a little slow, not from fear, but from the neatness of it all, the careful repetition. She held the letter for a moment without opening it. She thought of all the letters she had carried in her life. Notes from a mother to a child, messages between neighbors, receipts and lists and reminders, cards with bright pictures, a few letters with news that changed the shape of a week. This letter felt like it had been written to fit into Mara's hand. She broke the seal gently. The wax cracked with a soft sound, more like a snap of dry leaf than anything sharp. Mara unfolded the letter. The handwriting was tidy, not ornate, not hurried. Each line sat evenly on the page, as if the writer had all the time in the world and had chosen to use it kindly. Dear Mara, if you are reading this, then the harbor has done what it always does. It has offered you a small thing and asked you to carry it. Please keep the sea glass token. It is meant to be found. Today there is one small kindness waiting for you. On the harbor steps, near the third bench, a fisherman's blue scarf was left behind yesterday. It is folded beneath the bench slat, out of the wind. If you can, return it to the hands that miss it. You will recognize him by the patched sleeve on his right arm and the way he counts knots with his thumb. No need to ask questions. Just offer the scarf the way the sea offers sea glass. Quietly, warmly. And when you are done, sit for a moment on the steps. Look at the water. Let it tell you what it wants to tell you. With care, a friend of the coast. Mara read the letter twice. The first time she took in the words like a person taking in a new room. The second time, she noticed the small details, the way the writer knew her name, the way they knew she would carry a small thing without making a fuss. A friend of the coast. She turned the letter over, looking for any mark, any signature hidden in a corner. Nothing, only the indentation from the seal and a faint scent, not perfume exactly, but something like dried rosemary and sun-warmed paper. Mara set the letter on the table. She held the sea glass again. It was cold at first, then warmed quickly against her skin. A man hauled a crate of nets. Another adjusted a line on a boat. A boy ran past with a note clutched in his fist, his cheeks bright from the cold. When Mara reached the steps again, she slowed. The third bench sat where it always had, worn at the center, arms polished by many hands. Mara crouched and looked beneath the bench slats. At first she saw only shadow. Then, tucked into the gap as neatly as if someone had placed it there on purpose, she saw a fold of blue. She reached in and drew it out. The scarf was thick wool, the color of deep water under cloud. It smelled faintly of smoke and salt, like it had been worn near a stove, and then carried out into the morning. One end had a small embroidered line, a simple stitch that looked like a wave. Mara held it up. It was a good scarf, the kind someone would miss. She rose and draped it over her arm, then looked around for the fisherman the letter described. Patched sleeve, right arm, thumb counting knots. She did not have to search long. A man stood near the edge of the dock, leaning slightly as he worked a length of rope through his hands. His jacket was old, but well cared for, and the right sleeve had been patched with a darker cloth, sewn in straight, practical lines. As Mara watched, he ran his thumb along the rope, pausing at each knot as if greeting it. Mara walked toward him. She approached from the side so she would not startle him, though nothing about her movement felt sudden. When she was close enough, she lifted the scarf a little. "Excuse me," she said softly. The man looked up. His eyes were the color of driftwood. His face held the kind of weather that came from being outside more than inside. He looked at the scarf, and something eased in his expression. "That's mine," he said, and his voice was quiet, like he had learned long ago not to fight the wind. "I thought it might be," Mara said. It was tucked under the bench on the steps. He took the scarf carefully, as if it could tear if he pulled too hard. He ran his hand along it once, smoothing it. "I left it there yesterday," he said, almost to himself. "Set it down while I fixed a line. Then the day went on, and I went on with it." Mara smiled. Days do that. He gave a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Thank you," he said. "My wife made this. She'd have given me that look." Mara could imagine it, the look that said, "I made you warm. Please do not abandon warmth on a bench." "I'm glad it found its way back," Mara said. The man nodded, and for a moment he seemed to consider something. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bit of wrapped paper. It was a hard candy, round and pale yellow. "Here," he said, "for your trouble." Mara hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you," she said. "It's lemon," he added, as if that mattered, as if it made the gift more particular. "It's perfect," Mara said, and tucked it into her bag. He draped the scarf around his neck and adjusted it with 2 quick motions, practiced and grateful. "Good day to you," he said. "Good day," Mara replied. She walked away, feeling a small warmth rise in her chest, the kind that came from a good deed done without fuss. As she returned to the steps, she thought of the letter again. Offer the scarf the way the sea offers sea glass. Quietly, warmly. It had been exactly that. Mara sat on the harbor steps, a few steps down from the top, where the stone held a faint heat from the sun, even in cool weather. She rested her hands on her knees and looked at the water. The tide had turned slightly while she was gone. The line of wetness on the rocks had shifted. The boats moved with a different patience. A small dog trotted past on the upper lane, its leash held by someone out of frame, and it glanced at Mara with the brief, serious look dogs sometimes give, as if to say, "I see you." Mara smiled to herself. If you're listening nearby, she thought, stay close. There is plenty of gentle in this day. She let the thought go as soon as it came, like a leaf set on water. She watched a gull land and fold its wings with a precise little shake. She watched a fisherman lift his hands and throw a line, the arc smooth and easy. She felt for a moment as if the harbor was speaking in a language made of movement. Then she heard footsteps on the top step behind her. Not hurried, not heavy. Someone came down the steps and stopped 2 steps above Mara. Mara did not turn right away. She did not want to assume it meant anything. But the person did not continue down. They waited. Finally, Mara looked back. A boy stood there, perhaps 14, with a cap pulled low and cheeks reddened by the cold. He held a small bundle in his hands, parcel paper, string. Mara's heart gave a small, surprised lift. The boy looked at her, then at the steps, then back at her again, as if checking he had the right person. "Are you Mara?" he asked. "Yes," Mara said. He nodded once, like someone making sure of a task. "This was on the post desk," he said. "No name, but Mrs. Kidd at the desk said it might be for you. She said you do errands and you come by the harbor steps, and I'd probably find you here." Mara's mouth went a little dry, not from worry, but from the strange neatness of it. "Thank you," she said. "Did Mrs. Kitt say who brought it?" The boy shook his head. It was there when she opened, just sitting like it belonged. Mara reached for the bundle. The boy held it out, then paused, as if he had one more thing to say. "Also," he added, "Mrs. Kitt said to tell you there was a stamp. A weird one. She said it looked like something old." Mara felt her fingers tighten gently on the parcel. "Thank you," she said again. The boy tipped his cap and started back up the steps, already letting the task leave his mind. Mara watched him go, then turned her gaze to the bundle in her hands. The parcel paper was similar to the first, but the fold was different, as if made by the same hands on a different day, or by different hands following a shared idea. The string crossed twice this time, making a small square pattern on top. And there, pressed into the paper, was a wax seal, sea blue again, but slightly darker at the center, and at the edge, a faint swirl of green, like a hint of algae caught in glass. The impression in the wax was still a shell, but not the same shell. This one had a longer curve, a more spiraled edge. Mara held it up to the light. The wax caught the pale sun and made it look as if the seal had depth. She felt a quiet thrill, the kind that comes when a story offers you a second page. Mara rose from the steps. She did not open the new parcel there, not yet. The letter had told her to sit and look at the water, and she had done that. And she wanted to carry it properly. She walked back toward the shed. Inside, the air smelled like old boards and rope. The table waited. Mara set the second parcel down and sat. Before she opened it, she took the Seaglass token from her pocket and placed it beside the parcel. The token looked calm on the wood, as if it had always belonged there. Mara looked at it and wondered who had handled it last, who had chosen it, wrapped it, sealed it, and set it at the harbor steps like a message in plain sight. She untied the string and unfolded the paper. Inside was another letter, folded the same way as the first. There was no second Seaglass piece this time, only the paper and the wax. Mara broke the seal. This seal too cracked softly, and the scent of rosemary rose again, faint and reassuring. She unfolded the letter. The handwriting was the same. "Thank you for carrying the scarf back to its place. A small kindness changes the weight of a day, even when no one sees it. You have the token now. Keep it close. It will help you recognize what is meant for you as the coast keeps speaking. There is one more thing to notice today. On the harbor steps where you sat, look at the underside of the top rail. There is a mark there. Not carved, not painted, pressed into the wood the way a seal is pressed into wax. You will understand what it means later. For now, it is enough to know it is there. And if you pass the bookstall near the market lane, pause. There will be a postcard soon. It will not know where it belongs. You will." With care, a friend of the coast, Mara read it once, then again, slower. The letter had thanked her, which made the whole thing feel less like a trick and more like a thread being offered. It had also pointed her forward, toward a bookstall and a postcard without an address. A next step. Mara folded the letter and placed it with the first. Then she stood, carrying the weight of the mystery in a gentle way, like carrying a wrapped loaf. She returned to the harbor steps. The tide was still shifting. The wind had calmed a little, and the air felt clearer, as if the day had finished choosing itself after all. Mara climbed the steps one by one, and stopped at the top where the rail ran along the side, smooth and polished by countless hands. She leaned slightly and looked beneath it. At first she saw only the underside of wood, worn and pale. Then she saw the mark. It was small, pressed into the grain. A shell, again, but simpler than the ones in wax. Just a curved line with a few ridges, like the idea of a shell rather than a perfect copy. It was not new. The edges had softened with time, as if the mark had been there through seasons of salt air and sun. Mara traced it lightly with her fingertip. She did not know what it meant yet, but she knew in the quiet way you know certain things without proof, that it was connected. A seal pressed into wood, a token of sea glass, letters without a sender. Mara stood at the top of the steps and looked out over the harbor again, but now the scene felt slightly altered. as if she had stepped into a familiar room and noticed a hidden door in the paneling. The town remained itself. Work went on. People moved. The gulls argued gently over nothing important, and within that ordinary life, a line of mystery had been laid down, soft as string. She let her hand fall from the rail and stood for a moment with the mark in her mind. Then she did one more ordinary thing, because ordinary things were how this town stayed kind. The post desk was only a short walk from the steps, a narrow counter inside a shop that sold stamps and small bits of news. The bell above the door made a shy sound when Mara entered. Mrs. Kit looked up from her ledger. Her glasses sat low on her nose, as if they preferred the view of paper. "Mara," she said, "you got it." "I did," Mara replied. "You mentioned the stamp." Mrs. Kit's eyes brightened. "It wasn't one of ours. It looked like something from the old coastal route, back when mail came in by boat as often as cart. The ink impression was faint, like it had been pressed many times and learned to be gentle." "Did it have words?" Mara asked. "No words I could read," Mrs. Kit said. "Just a shell. Different from the scallop on the harbor invoices, this one had a spiral to it. Like a whelk." Mara felt a small click inside her thoughts. The second wax seal. The longer curve. Mrs. Kit lowered her voice. "My grandmother kept a tin of old seals in her sewing drawer. For keepsakes," she said. "I remember a shell like that, and wax the color of sea glass. Do you think someone still has it?" Mrs. Kit shrugged. "Someone always has something. Things don't vanish here. They wait." Mara nodded. Mrs. Kit softened her expression. "Whatever it is, it doesn't feel unkind." "No," Mara said. "It doesn't." Outside again, Mara carried that small clue with her, tucked alongside the token and the folded letters. Before she went to the market lane, she took the marmalade up the short rise toward the cottages that leaned into the hillside. The path smelled less of salt and more of damp earth and wood smoke. At the cottage door, a woman opened with flour on her hands and relief in her eyes. "You're a saint," the woman said, seeing the wrapped jar. "Marmalade is just good planning," Mara said, and handed it over. "Come in one moment," the woman insisted. Mara stepped only to the edge of the kitchen warmth. On the table lay a torn scrap of parcel paper, saved without meaning to. A faint smear of blue-green wax marked the paper. Not a seal, just a trace, like the memory of one. The woman noticed Mara looking. "Found it stuck under my step this morning," she said. "No parcel with it. Just that little bit. Odd, isn't it?" Mara kept her voice light. "Odd, yes." The woman laughed softly. "The coast does odd things." Mara nodded and stepped back out, the door closing gently behind her. As she walked down toward the harbor again, she felt the mystery widen by a small, steady inch, like a door opening without a squeak. Mara turned toward the market lane. She did not hurry. Her errands were done, the jar of marmalade safe in her bag, the twine ready for use. In her pocket, the Seaglass token rested against the folded letters. It warmed with her body heat, becoming less like an object found and more like something she had always carried. As Mara walked, she passed the places she knew by heart. The corner where someone always left a bowl of water for dogs in summer. The window where an old man kept the small ship model that never changed position. The doorway where the smell of fresh bread always seemed to spill out, no matter the hour. She let the town be the town, and she let the new thread pull gently at the edge of her attention. By the time she reached the mouth of the market lane, she could already see the bookstall in the distance, its awning striped and familiar, the stacks of books arranged with a careful chaos. Mara did not go all the way there yet. The letter had said, "Pause and you pass it. Soon there will be a postcard. Soon." For now, Mara stopped at the edge of the lane and looked back toward the harbor, where the steps shone pale against the darker stones. Somewhere behind her, someone laughed softly at something kind. Somewhere ahead, paper waited to be unfolded again. Mara took one more steady breath, not a lesson, not a ritual, just the natural way a person fills their lungs before walking into the next moment. Then she stepped into the lane, carrying the Seaglass token, carrying the letters, carrying the quiet sense that the coast had begun a conversation with her. And the day, for all its ordinary sounds and scents, felt gently full of possibility. Chapter 2. The Postcard with No Address. Morning returned to the harbor with a quiet steadiness. Light slid over the water and found the stones first. It climbed to the rail next. It reached the benches after that. At that point, it touched the steps where Mara liked to pause. A mild wind moved through the rigging and made a soft music that belonged here. Mara came down the lane with her canvas bag at her hip. Salt clung lightly to her hair. The air carried bread from somewhere nearby, warm and plain. At the top of the steps, she rested her hand on the rail and looked beneath it. The small shell mark was still pressed into the underside of the wood, older than the morning, patient as tide. Mara traced it once with her fingertip and let her hand fall away. In the inner pocket of her bag, the Seaglass token rested beside the folded letters. She did not take it out. She could feel its rounded edge through the cloth, and that small certainty traveled with her. Today held errands, twine for a neighbor repairing a sagging gate, pickled lemons for Rowan up the hill near the pines, a folded note to leave at the post desk for Mrs. Kit. At the fish stalls, the fisherman with the patched sleeve worked a line through his hands. The blue scarf was wrapped firmly at his throat now. He noticed Mara and gave one small nod. Mara returned it and kept walking. The market lane opened like a familiar hallway. Awnings made soft shadows over the stones. Voices stayed low and friendly. Paper rustled as shopkeepers straightened stacks and trays. The bookstall waited where it always waited. Striped awning, careful chaos, a smell of sun-warmed wood, old ink, and something faintly sweet drifting from the bakery window nearby. Ansel stood behind the counter, tapping a stack of postcards into neatness with his thumbs. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mara," he said. "Morning," she replied. Ansel's eyes held a small spark of curiosity. "I have something odd," he said. It arrived without anyone attached to it. He slid one postcard forward, careful as if he were moving a thin sheet of glass. It had no address, no name, no message written in ink. On the front was a simple shoreline drawing, a few waves, a lighthouse sketched at the edge as if it had been remembered rather than copied. At the top corner sat a stamp, not ink, wax, sea blue again, but with a faint wash of green along the edge, like kelp caught in glass. The shell pressed into it spiraled this time, crisp and sure. "Where did it come from?" Mara asked. "Just there when I lifted the shutter," Ansel said. "No one brought it in that I saw. No one asked about it. It waited like it belonged." Mara held her hand near the postcard without touching the wax. She could leave it in the tray and let it become part of the ordinary morning. Yet the card felt like it had her name without needing to write it. Ansel waited, calm as ever. He simply gave Mara room to decide. "Yes," Mara said softly. "I will take it." "No charge," Ansel replied. "If a thing does not know where it belongs, coins will not help it." Mara smiled at that. "That is a very bookstall opinion," she said. "It is practical too," Ansel answered, and his mouth twitched, as if he almost laughed. Mara slid the postcard into her bag and kept it flat, so the seal would not smear. She stayed a moment longer, letting normal habits steady her. Her eyes drifted over a worn novel, a small collection of harbor sketches, a slim book of coastal maps. Ansel noticed her glance linger on the maps. I put those out today, he said, for anyone who likes roots, but you like them most. Mara did not argue. Roots lived in her head like songs, and she heard them even when she was not trying. Before she stepped away, Ansel reached beneath the counter again. This was left here yesterday, he said, placing a plain notebook on the counter. No signature of any kind, just tucked under the edge of the table like it was shy. He opened it to a page near the front. A corner of parcel paper was pressed flat there, trimmed into a neat angle like the beginning of a shape that wanted to become something else. Beneath it, tidy handwriting offered a single line. Look for what does not fit. Mara stared at the words. Nothing sharp rose in her. Only recognition, the way a person recognizes a tune they did not know they remembered. I thought you might want to see it, Ansel said. You notice things. I do, Mara admitted. If you want to hold it for a bit, take it, Ansel said. If you do not, it can sit here until it finds someone else. Mara hesitated, then nodded. I will hold it for now, she said. Bring it back any time, Ansel replied. No story demands ownership. Mara tucked the notebook into her bag behind the postcard and stepped out into the lane again. The day still looked ordinary. Only her attention had changed. The harbor shed felt like a good place to open anything that arrived in silence. Inside, pine pitch lingered in the boards. A stripe of light fell across the table. Mara set her bag down and laid out what she carried. First the Seaglass token, then the folded letters, then the postcard. In the quiet, then the notebook. They sat in a neat row, like items laid out for counting. Mara broke the wax seal on the postcard gently. It gave with a soft crack, more like a dry leaf than anything sharp. She turned the card over. No inked message waited there. No handwriting appeared. By the doorway, no name sat at the bottom. For a moment it looked blank. Mara tilted it toward the doorway light. That was when faint embossing revealed itself, pressed so lightly it would be missed by anyone in a hurry. Not lost, just waiting. The words did not feel like a warning. They felt like reassurance. Mara set the postcard beside the letters and opened the notebook again. The parcel paper corner sat stubbornly ordinary on the page. The line beneath it asked her to notice without raising its voice. Mara closed the notebook and sat with her hands folded for a minute. No ritual, no lesson, only thinking. Yesterday the letter had asked for one small kindness. Return the fisherman's scarf. It had been simple. It had been warm. Today felt different. The postcard did not ask for an action yet. It asked for a way of seeing. Mara stood and stepped back into town. The tide was lifting now, and boats tugged gently at their lines. The harbor kept its low conversation with stone and rope. As Mara walked, she watched for small mismatches, a ribbon tied to a gate where no ribbon usually hung, a basket left neatly on a step, with no one nearby. On the lane, a chalk curve on a wall that looked almost like a shell. She did not collect these things. She let them enter her mind like pins on a map. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit stepped outside with her ledger tucked under her arm. When she saw Mara, her eyes shifted to Mara's bag as if she already knew something new was inside it. You were at Ansel's, Mrs. Kit said. Mara held up the postcard. That stamp, Mrs. Kit murmured, old coastal route style. The shell keeps changing, Mara said. Mrs. Kit nodded. Seals are like families, she replied. Same blood, different faces. Mrs. Kit leaned closer, voice dropping without drama. Did the wax smell like rosemary, she asked. It did, Mara said. That is paper kept in an herb drawer, Mrs. Kit replied. Old habit. People used to do it to keep insects away. Mara's thoughts shifted. A sewing drawer, a tin of old seals, patient hands. Is there anyone in town who still keeps seals? Mara asked. Not many, Mrs. Kit said. But people keep old ways without announcing them. If you want a place to notice, she added, walk through the conservatory. Do not ask questions. Just look. Mara thanked her and continued her errands, letting the mystery walk beside the ordinary. At the grocer's, jars stood in tidy rows. Mara chose the pickled lemons that looked brightest, the slices pressed against glass like little crescents. The grocer wrapped the jar with practiced hands and tied it with twine that lay flat and neat. Outside, Mara delivered the spool of twine to the neighbor with the gate. The neighbor's hinge squeaked softly, then quieted as new loops tightened into place. A tired smile and a quick squeeze of Mara's hand said more than words. After that, Mara carried a bundle of kindling to an older couple. They accepted it with the calm gratitude of people who know what small help means. They offered her a warm look that said, "You make the day easier." Then Mara climbed the path up the hill. Pines thickened on either side. The air smelled of damp needles and faint wood smoke. Rowan opened the door before she knocked. He always seemed to hear her steps through the floorboards. Mara held up the jar. "Pickled lemons," she said. Rowan took it carefully and set it on a shelf with a motion that wasted nothing. "They will last," he said. "They should," Mara replied. "The grocer swears by them." Rowan's mouth twitched. "He swears by everything that sells." Rowan noticed her bag and waited without prying. Mara reached into the inner pocket and took out the Seaglass token. She held it in her palm. Rowan looked at it. His expression shifted in a way that was almost invisible. Not alarm, not fear, only quiet recognition. He did not touch it. "That piece has been in the sea a long time," Rowan said. Mara gave a small nod. "If it found you," Rowan said, "then you are meant to carry it for a while." Rowan paused, then added, "Do not carry it alone in your head. Bring it back here if it ever feels heavy." Warmth rose in Mara's chest at that, steady warmth, the kind Rowan offered without theatrics. Mara thanked him, declined tea, and walked back down toward town center. The conservatory sat on the far side of the square, glass catching light and holding it. Inside, damp green air met her. Leaves shone as if they had been polished. Small oranges hung like lanterns. Mara walked slowly along the path inside. She did not look for a person. She looked for what did not fit. Near the center, a small table held a cup and saucer. Empty, no one nearby. What was strange was what lay beneath the saucer's edge. A square of parcel paper, folded crisp, one corner trimmed into a neat angle. Mara slid it out with 2 fingers. Inside was a plain card folded once and sealed with a tiny dab of wax. Sea blue again, and the shell impression was different once more open, less spiral. Mara broke the wax and unfolded the card. The handwriting matched the letters, tidy and even. "Dear Mara, do not write an address on the postcard. Do not give it to the post desk. Keep it with you until sunset. Let it sit in your bag beside the token. You will notice who needs it. It will not be a big need. It will be a small one. When you recognize the place, leave the postcard there. No signature, no explanation. With care, a friend of the coast." Mara read the note slowly, then folded it and slipped it into the notebook. She left the conservatory and stepped into cooler air with her attention open. The town carried on. A cart rolled by with a low rumble on stone and moved on. A shop door opened and closed, bringing out a brief scent of soap. With a small pause, a man adjusted a coil of rope on his shoulder and hummed as if the tune kept him company. Mara walked the streets again, slower now. Not hunting, not guessing wildly, only letting the day show her what it wanted to show. A few blocks from the market lane, she passed a bench near a low stone wall. An older man sat there feeding crumbs to a pair of small birds. His cap was pulled low. His shoulders looked tired in a familiar way. At his feet, a small paper bag had tipped over. A lemon drop had rolled onto the stone and lay there like a small sun fallen from its place. The man looked at it, then looked away as if bending had become too expensive for one small candy. Mara stopped. She did not hurry him. She did not speak first. In the next breath, she bent, picked up the lemon drop and set it back in the bag. Then she steadied the bag so it would not spill again. The man looked up. His eyes were watery in the cool air but kind. "Thank you," he said. Mara nodded and started to walk on. Then she noticed something else. At the far end of the bench, almost hidden under the grain, a tiny shell mark had been pressed into the wood years ago. Not carved deep, just a mark that did not fit unless you were paying attention. Mara's hand found the postcard in her bag. She took it out. She did not write on it. From the counter, she did not add a note. She set it on the bench beside the man face down as if someone had left it and meant to return. The man glanced at it. He did not reach right away. Mara kept her voice low. "It is for later," she said. Then she stepped away without explanation. When she glanced back from the corner, the man had turned the postcard over. He stared at the shoreline drawing. Then he smiled. Not a big smile. A small one, like a window cracked open in a warm room. Mara kept walking. Warmth rose in her chest. Not pride, only the quiet rightness of noticing. The postcard had found its place, not by address, by attention. As afternoon eased toward evening, Mara returned to the harbor. She wanted to end the day where it began. The steps held their usual worn smoothness. The rail felt familiar under her palm. Along the steps, the shell mark beneath it stayed patient and unchanged. Mara sat for a few minutes and watched the water. Boats rocked gently. Lines tapped lightly against masts. A gull landed and folded its wings with careful precision. In her bag, the Seaglass token rested beside the folded letters and the notebook. The postcard was no longer there. That felt correct. Toward evening, harbor lights began to glow one by one, steady points of warmth along the water. At the corner where the lane opened toward home, Mara paused and touched the inner pocket of her bag to feel the token there. It was cool again, as if it had remembered the sea for a moment. Inside her house, Mara placed the notebook and the letters in the shallow drawer where she kept her keys. Not locked away, only kept safe. She warmed a cup of tea and let the steam soften the room. She noticed a fine, pale thread clinging to her coat cuff, thin and strong like the twine used for parcel paper. Mara set it in the drawer beside the token as a tiny clue and closed the drawer gently. After leaving the bench, Mara took the long way back, the path that followed the edge of the harbor before turning toward the square. The water had shifted while she walked. The line of wetness on the rocks sat higher now. Boats lifted with a different patience. At the harbor steps, Mara paused again, not to check the mark, but to look at the benches. The third bench held its familiar worn shine. The second bench held a patch of sun. Without making a fuss, the first bench held a small coil of thin rope someone had forgotten, neatly gathered as if it had been rescued from a tangle. Mara did not take the rope. She only nudged it into a safer place, tucked close to the stone so it would not be stepped on. A simple action. A small correction. The kind of thing towns do for themselves. When she reached the bakery window, warmth drifted out in a slow breath. Elias stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, flour dust on his hands. He glanced up and smiled as if he had been expecting her without expecting anything from her. "You look like you've been walking a story," he said. Mara laughed softly. "Maybe the town is writing one." Elias set a small paper bag on the counter. He did not make a show of it. "Lemon drops," he said. "2, for later." Mara accepted them. "Thank you," she said. Elias leaned in a little, voice low. "Ansel mentioned an odd stamp," he added. "People have been noticing small things today." Mara kept her answer light. "It seems the coast likes to leave notes." Elias nodded once. Coasts do, they just use different ink. Mara slipped the lemon drops into her bag and continued on. At the post desk, the bell above the door made its shy sound when she stepped inside. Mrs. Kit looked up from her ledger. Her glasses sat low as if they preferred the view of paper. Back again, she said, and it was not a complaint. Mara placed her folded note on the counter, then set down a small scrap of parcel paper she had carried since the conservatory. Not the note, not the wax, only the corner cut at a clean angle. I found another piece, Mara said. Mrs. Kit examined it without touching it at first. That cut, she murmured. Careful hand. Someone who likes edges to line up. Mara watched her, waiting. Mrs. Kit reached under the counter and pulled out a narrow tin, old enough that the lid had softened at the corners. She opened it. Inside were little bits of the town's habits, buttons, a twist of ribbon, a dried sprig of rosemary tied with thread. Under the awning, a few wax fragments kept in folded paper like they mattered. Mrs. Kit took out one small piece of wax and held it near the light. Sea blue, a faint wash of green at the edge. This is from a long time ago, she said, back when the coastal route was more boat than cart. Mara felt her attention narrow again, quiet as a held breath. Who kept it? She asked. Mrs. Kit closed the tin. People kept things, she said. They still do, some for memory, some for use. Near the water, some because they like having a story in a drawer. Mara thought of Rowan's steady hands and the way he had recognized the token without touching it. Is there a name attached to the route? Mara asked. Mrs. Kit's eyes shifted toward the window, as if she were looking at a shoreline only she could see. Not one that matters, she said. The route belonged to the town, it belonged to the sea, it belonged to whoever carried mail with care. Mara nodded. Mrs. Kit slid the tin back under the counter. Walk past the bookstall before it closes, she said, not to ask Ansel, only to see what sits there when people think no one is watching. Mara thanked her and stepped back out. The square had softened into evening. Shadows stretched longer across stone. Window glass held warm light. Voices lowered as if the whole town had decided to speak gently. Mara turned toward the bookstall. Ansel was closing a stack of books into a box, moving slowly so the corners would not catch. He looked up when Mara approached, and his smile stayed easy. I won't keep you, Mara said. You aren't keeping me, Ansel replied. You're just part of the day. Mara stood by the edge of the stall, letting her eyes move the way they always did. A map book was missing from the stack she had noticed earlier. In its place sat a thin envelope, unsealed. No name on the front, no address. Ansel did not touch it. He did not look surprised. Mara did not touch it either. She only looked. On the back flap, a small mark had been pressed into the paper, faint and careful. Not wax, no printed ink. An impression, as if someone had pressed a shell against soft paper and then lifted it away. Mara could not tell which shell it was. The mark was too light for that. But she could tell it had been made by someone who did not want to shout. Ansel noticed her gaze. It wasn't there an hour ago, he said. Her voice stayed low. Do you want me to take it? Ansel shook his head. I think it's meant to be seen, he said. Not taken. At least not yet. Mara nodded. She stepped back, letting the envelope stay where it sat. On the way home, Mara chose the lane that passed the harbor steps one more time. The rail was cool now. The stone held a little of the day's warmth. Mara did not touch the shell mark again. She only looked out at the water. The tide had moved on. It always did. So did people. So did stories. And still some things waited. Mara walked home with her canvas bag at her hip. Inside the bag, the Seaglass token rested in its pocket. The notebook lay behind the folded letters. The lemon drops sat in their small paper bag. In her mind, the postcard was gone, where it was meant to be. At her door, Mara paused and listened. Not for a sign, not for footsteps, only for the ordinary sound of her home settling into evening. She set the jar wrapper from the pickled lemons into the bin, smoothed once as if kindness could extend even to paper, then washed her hands. Tea steamed in her cup. Before bed, Mara opened the drawer and placed the parcel paper corner beside the token. Two small pieces of a larger shape. Mara did not try to guess the whole picture. She only made room for it. Sleep came gently. When morning returned, the harbor would be there, and so would whatever waited next. Night settled without ceremony. Somewhere beyond the lane, the tide kept moving, and the harbor kept its quiet conversation with stone. Mara fell asleep without needing to solve anything. Tomorrow would bring another day of errands, and the coast would continue speaking in its soft way. Sometime in the night, a soft drizzle came and went. It was light enough to be more sound than weather, a small brushing on the window pane. Mara woke once and listened for a minute. The house held stillness without emptiness. The town held stillness without loneliness. She thought of the old man's small smile and how it had arrived slowly, the way warmth arrives in a room after someone closes a door. Mara rolled over and let the thought go. Before dawn, the air turned cooler and cleaner. When morning returned, windows would brighten one at a time. The bookstall would lift its shutter. The post-desk bell would make its shy sound. Mara would step out again with her canvas bag and her calm curiosity, ready for another ordinary day that might turn gently into a clue. In the morning before she left the house, Mara opened the notebook again. The parcel paper corner was still pressed to the page, its cut edge neat and deliberate. The line beneath it sat there like a steady request. Mara did not add her own writing beside it. She did not want to crowd someone else's message. Instead, she turned to a blank page farther back and drew a small map in pencil. Not a real map with measurements. A Mara map, the kind she carried in her head. Harbor steps, market lane, bookstall, post desk, conservatory, the bench by the low stone wall. She marked each place with a small dot. Then she added a tiny shell beside the harbor steps, and another beside the bench, and another beside the bookstall. 3 shells in 3 places. Mara stared at the page. The pattern did not solve anything. It only made the town feel like it had been speaking for a long time, waiting for someone to listen in the right way. She tucked the pencil away and closed the notebook. At the door, she paused with her hand on the latch. The fine, pale thread still sat in the drawer beside the token. It did not look important. It looked like nothing. And still it felt connected. Mara did not take the thread. She left it there, a small piece of evidence waiting in a quiet place. Outside, the lane smelled of damp stone and early bread. Mara walked down toward the harbor again. The tide was low enough to show dark green rock skin near the waterline, slick and shining. Boats lifted gently on their lines, and the rigging made its patient music. At the steps, Mara paused. She did not touch the rail this time. She simply looked at the benches. The third bench held a folded newspaper with a smooth stone set on top, keeping it from blowing away. The second bench held nothing but old warmth in the wood. For a moment, the first bench held a small cup someone had set down and forgotten, empty and clean. Mara picked up the cup and carried it to a bin without making a show of it. She moved the stone from the newspaper to the bench arm so the page would keep its place. Small acts, invisible to most people, essential to a town. As she walked away, Mara wondered if someone had watched her do it. Not to judge her, not to test her, only to see. The thought did not make her uneasy. It made her feel part of something older than the morning. Mara turned toward the market lane, and the day opened ahead like a familiar hallway again. Whatever came next would arrive the same way the postcard had. Quietly, carefully, in its own time. At the edge of the lane, Mara slowed and let the moment settle. She could feel the Seaglass token in her bag without touching it. She could feel the notebook's weight, light but present. The coast did not demand answers from her. It offered small tasks and small notices. Mara was willing to meet it there with each careful step, The town felt a little more like a letter being opened at the right pace. She walked on. The day was ready. Chapter 3. The Parcel Paper Star. Mara reached the pier while the morning was still soft around the edges. Low tide showed the dark green skin of the rocks below, and high tide kept the boats lifting gently on their lines. Light broke across the water in slow pieces, as if the sea preferred to hold the sky without grabbing at it. She paused near the first bollard and listened to the familiar harbor talk. Rope creaked in the rigging, boards gave a quiet reply underfoot, and a gull settled somewhere behind her without making a fuss. Nothing sharp lived in the sound, only the steady kind that belonged. In the inner pocket of her canvas bag, the Seaglass token rested beside the folded letters and the plain notebook. The token felt cool through the fabric, and the notebook felt like a borrowed promise. The postcard was gone now. It had found a bench and a small smile, then slipped into the town's ordinary life like a pebble dropped back into the sea. Mara liked that. Today her errands were simple again. She carried cloth for a neighbor who mended nets by the window, oats for an older dog near the corner shop, and honey for Elias at the bakery. Her bag felt nicely weighted with useful things. Along the boards, Mara walked with the steady rhythm she trusted. Yesterday's salt clung to the wood, and tar and sun-warmed grain lingered in the air. Halfway down, she stopped at the railing and looked out. The lighthouse sat in the distance like a pale thought, and a line of foam curled at the rocks and vanished. A small boat tapped its neighbor softly, as if saying hello in a language made of wood. Mara's hand drifted to her bag without thinking. She did not take out the token, she only checked that it was there. Comfort lived in that quiet wait. Toward the far end of the pier, the air tasted cleaner and the wind felt lighter. A man sat on a low crate near the pilings, repairing a net with slow fingers and a patience that looked practiced. A tin mug cooled beside him. When Mara passed, he looked up and gave a small nod. Mara returned the nod and kept walking. Near the end of the pier, something caught her eye where nothing was meant to catch it. A scrap of parcel paper lay tucked between two boards, folded too neatly for the wind to have done it. Mara crouched. The parcel paper was the same pale brown she had seen before, and the edge was cut clean. One corner had been trimmed into a sharp little point, the kind a careful hand makes on purpose. She slid it free with 2 fingers. It had been folded into a small star. Not complicated, not fussy, only careful, the way some people fold napkins or letters when they want to make a moment feel looked after. Mara held it in her palm. The star was light, yet it carried intention. A tiny dab of wax held one flap in place, sea blue again, and a faint streak of pale gold ran through it like sunlight trapped in glass. The shell impression was there, but smaller, more rounded, less spiral, as if the stamp had turned a page. Curiosity rose in Mara with no rush attached to it. She stood and looked around. No one watched her hands. A gull perched on a post and then looked away, uninterested, while the net mender returned to his work. 2 people farther down spoke quietly as they walked, wrapped in their own conversation. That made the paper star feel even more like it had been meant for her. Mara slipped the star into her bag, careful with the wax. Then she went to the end of the pier and rested her hands on the railing. She stayed there long enough to let the sea breathe against the pilings and the boats rock with patient motion. When she turned back, she did not open the star on the pier. A quiet table would be better. Paper deserved calm. Wind did not need to be invited. On the way back, Mara stopped at Elias's bakery. Warmth met her at the door. Bread and cinnamon and sugar softened the lane and made it feel like a homecoming, even if she had only been gone an hour. Elias was behind the counter, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour. Mara, he said, and his voice held the same steady warmth as ever. Morning, she replied. I brought you honey. Elias lifted his eyebrows. That means you want something. Mara smiled. That means I thought of you. He accepted the jar with care. Both can be true, he said. Elias slid a small loaf toward her in a paper bag. Take it, he added. And take 2 lemon drops, too, for the road. Mara accepted the bag. Thank you. Elias leaned in slightly, curious without being nosy. You look like you found something, he said. Mara did not mention wax seals. She only said, maybe. Elias nodded as if that was enough. Pier days do that, he said. Mara left the bakery and walked toward the harbor shed. The shed sat where it always sat, half tool room and half shelter. With the door open and the table waiting inside, Mara set her bag down and took out the things in her careful order. First came the Seaglass token, then the folded letters, then the notebook. Ahead of her then the parcel paper star. The star looked even smaller on the table, and the stripe of light from the doorway made the wax glow faintly where the gold streak ran through it. Mara touched the edge of the wax with her thumb and felt the slight rise of the shell impression. Then she unfolded the star. The paper opened with small crisp sounds, not loud, only paper doing what paper does. Inside was a note, cream paper thick enough to hold ink without bleeding. It was folded once and sealed again with sea blue wax. The shell impression was different again, shaped like a tiny fan, ridged and open. Mara broke the seal gently. The wax cracked with a soft sound and the scent rose again. Dried rosemary, sun-warmed paper, and herb drawer's quiet memory. The handwriting was the same tidy hand as before, not ornate, not hurried. Dear Mara, the coast is pleased with you. Not because you solved anything, because you carried something gently and you let it find its place. Today you found a small star. Keep the paper. Keep the star shape in your mind. There is a friendly find waiting for you on the pier. Near the third piling, someone tucked a tin of buttons behind a loose plank. It belongs to a net mender who uses the tin as his small kit. He does not know it slipped from his bag yesterday. You will recognize him by the white thread looped around his finger, and the way he hums only when he thinks no one can hear. Return the tin without questions. If you can, bring him a small kindness as well. Something simple, a warm roll, a lemon drop without hurrying, a hello that stays gentle. Afterward, look at the underside of the pier rail. There is a mark there, pressed into the wood. It will not match the mark at the harbor steps. It will belong to the pier. With care, a friend of the coast. Mara read the letter twice. First she took in the directions. Then she noticed the tone, the way it felt like a smile offered in words. She folded the letter and tucked it with the others. The pier, the third piling, the tin of buttons, the white thread looped around a finger, and the hum that belonged to privacy stayed clear in her mind. Mara could do this. She kept the lemon drops in her pocket. The small loaf stayed in her bag. Then she walked back to the pier. Light had shifted. The water held a slightly different color now, as if the day had turned its face toward a new angle of sky. Mara walked the boards until she found the third piling. The net mender was still there. His mug had cooled. His fingers kept working with patient motion. As Mara drew closer, she heard the low hum the letter described. On his right hand, a loop of white thread circled his finger, keeping the line from tangling. Mara slowed. She came from the side so her shadow would not fall suddenly. "Excuse me," she said softly. The man looked up. His eyes were the color of weathered rope. He blinked once, as if waking from a private thought. "Yes," he said. Mara did not mention the letter. She only looked at the boards near the piling. "Is this where you were working yesterday?" she asked. He nodded. "Most days," he said. Mara crouched and ran her fingers along the plank edges. One board sat slightly looser than the others. It lifted a fraction under her touch. Behind it, something dull and metal caught the light. Mara slid the board up just enough and reached in. Her fingers closed around a tin. Small, round, old, the kind of tin that once held biscuits, now repurposed for a life of practical use. Mara brought it out and set it on the plank. The man's face shifted, surprise first, then relief. "My buttons," he said, and the words came out like an exhale. He opened the tin and looked inside. Buttons of different sizes, a needle, a bit of thread, and a tiny pair of dull scissors waited there. "I thought I lost it," he said. "It was tucked back here," Mara replied, like it wanted to stay safe. He gave a quiet laugh. "The tin can't choose," he said. "Maybe it can," Mara said, keeping the humor gentle. The man looked at her, then smiled. Not big, not flashy, only a small ease in his face. "Thank you," he said. "I use these every week." Mara nodded. She pulled a lemon drop from her pocket. "I have something," she said, and held it out. The man's eyebrows lifted. He looked almost shy about accepting. Mara made it easy and placed it on the plank beside the tin. The man picked it up and turned it between his fingers. "My sister used to buy these," he said, "from the bakery." Mara's chest warmed at that, a simple thread to a simple memory. "I was at Elias's," she said. "He sent them." The man nodded and put the lemon drop in his pocket like it mattered. Then he closed the tin and slipped it into his bag. His hum did not start again right away. Instead, he sat a moment, net in his lap, as if the kindness had shifted the weight of the morning. Mara let him have that moment. Then she remembered the last line, the underside of the pier rail. Mara walked to the railing and leaned to look beneath it, where hands rarely look unless they are searching for splinters or dropped coins. There, pressed into the wood, was a mark. Not a shell, a star. 5 points, slightly uneven, like it had been pressed by a hand that cared more about meaning than perfection. Mara traced it lightly with her fingertip. It felt old, smoothed by salt air, patient in a different way than the shell at the harbor steps. A star for the pier, a shell for the steps. 2 marks, 2 places, 1 thread. Mara stepped back and looked down the length of the pier. Boards stretched toward town. People moved in small ways. Work continued. Kindness continued. The mystery did not need to be solved today. It only needed to be carried gently, one small errand at a time. Mara returned to the shed with the letter in her bag and the Seaglass token resting in its pocket. At the table, she folded the parcel paper star again. Not exactly the same. Close enough. She tucked the star into the notebook between the page with the parcel corner and the next blank page. A star in a corner. 2 beginnings of shapes. 2 reminders to notice. Before she left, Mara looked at the token once more. She did not ask it to explain anything. She only accepted that the coast had begun to speak in a language made of paper and wax, and small acts of care. If you are nearby, the day is gentle here. Then she let the thought drift away and stepped back into the lane. The harbor behind her breathed. The town ahead held its warm, ordinary life. Somewhere in that ordinary life, the next small clue was already waiting to be found. Back in town, Mara delivered the cloth to the neighbor who mended nets by the window. The neighbor thanked her with a quiet smile and pressed the fabric to her cheek for a second, testing its softness. A kettle cooled on the stove, and the room smelled faintly of tea leaves and clean thread. Before Mara left, the neighbor lifted her chin toward a small shelf of jars and tins. A short row of biscuit tins sat there, each one labeled in careful handwriting. Buttons, needles, spare string, tiny scissors, all stored the way a practical person stores small solutions. Mara thought of the tin she had just returned and felt another gentle click inside her thoughts. The coast was using ordinary tools as its language. Without hurrying, Mara stopped at the corner shop and set down the small bag of oats. The owner slid it into a drawer under the counter like it was a tiny secret and nodded toward the doorway. A gray-muzzled dog appeared as if he had been waiting behind it the whole time, polite and hopeful. Mara scratched his neck and left a single oat biscuit on the step, placed gently, like a note without words. The dog did not pounce. He only wagged slowly and looked up at her as if he understood quiet arrangements. Mara smiled and walked on, feeling the town's calm goodness move with her. Near the market lane, Mara paused at a window where someone had set a bowl of warm water to cool. The bowl was for tea, yet the care in placing it felt like the same care that folded parcel paper into stars. A spoon rested beside the bowl with a handle shaped like a small fish, and the spoon did not match any other in the set. The mismatch made Mara think of the changing seals and the changing shells. Some things stayed in the same family, while taking on a new face each day. Mara did not need to ask who owned the spoon. Noticing was enough for this hour. At the post desk, Mrs. Kit was sorting a stack of envelopes with the slow precision of someone who respects paper. She looked up when Mara stepped in and read Mara's face the way she read handwriting. "You found something again," Mrs. Kit said, not accusing, only observing. Mara kept her answer simple and said she had found a star made of parcel paper. Mrs. Kit's eyes softened with recognition. She did not ask to see it. She only nodded, as if the town had done what it always did and placed a small thing where it belonged. Then Mrs. Kit mentioned almost casually that the old coastal route used to mark different stops with different symbols: shells for steps, stars for piers, and other small signs that made sense if you knew where to look. Mara thanked her and stepped back out into the lane with the idea held gently, like a wrapped loaf. Toward evening, Mara walked the harbor edge once more, not to search, only to let the day settle. She passed the benches on the steps and the rail that held its small shell mark beneath. The mark looked no brighter than the wood around it, yet it felt louder now that the pier had shown her a star. Two places speaking in two symbols, both pressed into wood, as if the coast preferred sturdy surfaces for its secrets. Mara stood with her palms on the rail a moment and watched the water change color as the sun lowered. Evening made everything look softer, including questions. That night, Mara opened the notebook at her table and let the parcel paper star rest beside the earlier corner of paper. She did not force the star back into its perfect fold. She let it be close enough, a shape remembered rather than copied. The wax on its flap caught the lamplight and looked more like honey than gold. Mara thought of Elias's jar and smiled at the way small colors kept repeating in new ways. She slipped the star into the notebook and closed it with a gentle hand. Then she set the Seaglass token beside the notebook and watched it catch the glow. Blue deepened at the center, edges paled like sky. The token looked peaceful, as if it was content to be carried for a while longer. Before bed, Mara stepped to her doorway and looked down the lane toward the harbor. No one was calling her. Nothing urgent pressed the night. Still, the town felt gently alive, as if kindness kept moving, even when lamps dimmed. Mara thought about the net mender's expression when he saw his tin again, and about the way a lemon drop could pull a memory close without any effort. The coast was not demanding cleverness. It was inviting simple care. Mara went inside, closed the door softly, and let the day end the way it began, steady and safe. In the early hours, a light drizzle brushed the window pane, more sound than weather. Mara woke once, not startled, only aware of the house settling in the quiet. She listened for a moment, then turned over and let sleep return. Even in rest, her mind held the pier's star mark and the harbor steps shell mark as if they were two pins on a map. Somewhere between those pins, a route was taking shape. Mara did not need to name it yet. The coast would keep speaking when it was ready. When morning returned, Mara would walk out again with her canvas bag and her calm curiosity. The harbor would greet her with rope music and salt air. The notebook would wait on her table, holding a corner of paper and a folded star like two beginnings. and the next seal, wherever it appeared, would change in its own small way. The next day's tide chart was pinned outside the chandlery, edges curled from sea air. Mara paused to read it, even though she did not need it, because looking at maps and charts made her feel oriented. Beside the chart, someone had drawn a small star in pencil, quick and light, as if marking a favorite time to walk. Mara did not touch the pencil mark. She only noticed it and smiled at the quiet echo. Ansel was closing up when Mara passed the bookstall again. He lifted his head and seemed to understand without being told that another small thing had happened. Mara thanked him for the notebook as if it was an ordinary loan, because that made it easier to carry. Ansel nodded and said he had always liked paper that traveled. Then he pointed at the corner of his counter where a roll of parcel paper sat, cut, clean, and ready. "Some people think paper is only for wrapping," he said. "I think it is for keeping care from spilling out." Mara took that sentence home like a second loaf in her bag. Up the hill, Rowan listened while Mara described the pier mark and the star folded from parcel paper. She kept the details simple and did not mention the letter word for word. Rowan did not ask for proof. He did not demand a theory. He only sat with the information like it was weather, the kind you respect without fighting. When Mara finished, Rowan said the coast had always liked small symbols. He remembered older fishermen carving tiny shapes under rails so their hands could find the right spot in fog. Mara pictured those hands in dim mornings and felt her chest soften. Rowan told her to keep walking the places that felt warm and to let the route reveal itself. Later, Mara brought a small roll to the net mender, not as payment and not as apology, just as a gentle follow-up. He accepted it with a nod and tucked it away, saving it for when his hands would be too busy to go looking for food. They spoke only a few words. The net mender told her the pier boards changed sound depending on the tide, and Mara listened closely as if that was valuable knowledge. In return, Mara mentioned the star mark under the rail. He smiled and said the old pier always had its secrets. Then he returned to his work, calm as a person whose world had been put back in order. In the afternoon, Mara sat on the harbor steps for a few minutes and watched the water move through its shades. She did not search the underside of the rail. She already knew the shell mark was there. Knowing it stayed put made the rest of the mystery feel less slippery. A child walked past holding a paper boat, and the boat's fold was crisp and careful. Mara wondered who had taught the child to fold it so neatly, then decided that question could wait. The coast seemed full of teachers, most of them quiet. That evening, Mara opened the notebook to a blank page and pressed the parcel paper star there gently with her palm. It would not stay forever, but it would hold the shape for a while. She wrote the date at the top of the page in small letters, not for drama, only for continuity. Then she wrote 3 words beneath it: Pier Star Buttons. The words looked plain, yet they carried the whole day when she read them back. Mara closed the notebook and set it beside the token, letting both rest where morning could find them. Near sunset, Mara walked the lane where shop lights begin to glow one at a time. The town smelled of warm bread and damp wood, and the faint mineral scent that rises when tide turns. A soft breeze moved a hanging sign, and the sign tapped lightly against its hook with a sound that felt like punctuation. Mara thought of the coast writing to her in marks and seals and folded paper. It was not a loud story. It was a steady one. Before sleep, Mara stood by her window and watched the last color leave the harbor. She remembered the wax sea blue with a streak like honey, and the shell that changed its face each time. Mara did not try to predict the next stamp. She only accepted that the pattern was not random. It was a route. It was a kindness. Near the pilings, it was a hand offering direction without pushing. Mara let that thought warm her, and then turned off the lamp. When the next morning came, Mara would do the same thing she always did. She would step out with her canvas bag and her small errands, and her steady eyes, the harbor would answer with rope music and quiet boards, and the pier would hold its star mark under the rail, keeping a pressed corner of paper and a folded star like two beginnings. In the harbor air, the Seaglass token would rest in its pocket, blue as water and patient as tide. Somewhere between those objects and those places, the root would keep unfolding, and Mara would keep carrying it gently. Mara returned to the shed once more and set the star on the table, opening it and closing it slowly until her hands remembered the folds. The paper made tiny sounds that reminded her of pages turning. When the star held its shape again, she noticed the way one point was slightly longer, as if the maker's fingers had lingered there. Mara wondered if the maker had meant that point to face the sea, then decided it might simply be a human quirk. Either way, the imperfect point made the star feel more real. Near the pier entrance, a small notice board held postings for lost gloves, found keys, and dates for market days. Someone had pinned a blank postcard there, not the same one as before, just a plain card with no writing. A wax seal sat at its corner, cracked, as if the message had already been taken. Mara did not pull it down. She only noted the idea that postcards can live in public places and still feel private to the right person. Elias saw Mara again later and asked, with a half-smile, if the pier had behaved itself. Mara answered that the pier had been kind. Elias laughed quietly and said that was the best kind of pier. Then he told her the old fisherman used to say the harbor has two languages, one made of water and one made of paper. Elias claimed he never understood the paper language until he opened his bakery ledger and found a pressed bit of seagrass tucked inside. Mara listened as if he was sharing a recipe, because in a way he was. At home, Mara wiped her hands, poured tea, and let the steam fog the window a little. She sat with the cup between her palms and pictured the star mark under the rail. A mark like that would not be noticed by someone in a rush. It would only reveal itself to someone who leaned close and chose to look. That suited Mara. It made noticing feel like participation rather than suspicion. When the house grew quiet, Mara placed the letters in order beside the notebook and set the wax fragments in a small envelope. She labeled the envelope simply with the word seals. The label was not dramatic, it was practical. Still, the small act of naming made the mystery feel contained, like yarn wound into a ball instead of trailing across the floor. Mara closed the drawer with a soft push and let herself be done for the night. In the morning, Mara planned to walk Market Lane again. The town would be fuller then, with baskets and friendly trading and small surprises tucked into ordinary corners. If the coast wanted her attention, it would find a way to place it gently in her path. Mara felt sure of that now. Before she slept, Mara set the Seaglass token on the windowsill for a minute and watched it catch the last trace of lamplight. The blue looked calmer there, as if the glass enjoyed being near open air. Mara set it back in the drawer with the notebook and the letters, then closed the drawer with a gentle push. Outside, the harbor kept moving in its quiet way, and the pier kept its star mark hidden under wood. Mara felt ready for whatever gentle letter came next. Chapter 4. The Tin of Lemon Drops. Market Lane woke in its usual careful way. Awnings went up one by one. Baskets thumped softly onto tables. Paper and twine appeared in tidy loops, as if they had been waiting behind shutters all night. The air carried bread from the bakery window and a faint sharpness of citrus from a crate that had just been opened. Stone underfoot held yesterday's warmth and this morning's coolness at the same time. Mara stepped into the lane with her canvas bag at her hip. In the inner pocket, the Seaglass token rested beside folded letters and the notebook. The parcel paper star was tucked safely between pages, pressed flat so it would keep its shape. Wax fragments sat in a small envelope, not as trophies, only as proof that the coast liked to leave marks. Under the awnings, people spoke in low, friendly voices. A bundle of herbs traded hands for a jar of jam. 2 candles became a skein of thread. A small bowl of buttons became a length of twine. The town moved on small exchanges the way a harbor moves on tide. Nothing had to be grand. Nothing had to be rushed. By the bookstall, Ansel was setting out a tray of postcards and a stack of thin notebooks. He looked up and gave a nod that held understanding without needing conversation. "Morning," Mara said. "Morning," Ansel replied. "Busy lane today." "It feels like a good day for it," Mara said. Ansel's eyes moved, brief and thoughtful, to the canvas bag. He did not ask what was inside. He never did. Instead, he slid a small book of coastal sketches toward the edge of the counter. "New pages," he said. "Same coast." Mara smiled and touched the cover with 2 fingers. "I'll look later," she said. Ansel nodded as if later was the right pace for many things. Near the bakery window, Elias was stacking warm rolls on a tray. The smell was gentle and steady, the kind that makes a street feel safer. He glanced up and lifted his chin in greeting. "Mara," he said. "Morning," she answered. Elias leaned on the counter. "Market Lane is stealing all my bread," he said. "Rude, really." "Bread was made to be stolen," Mara said, politely. Elias gave a quiet laugh and slid 2 lemon drops into a small paper bag. "For the road," he said, the way he often did. Mara thanked him and tucked the bag into a coat pocket. Outside, the lane was fuller now. A woman at a ribbon stall held lengths of cloth up to the light. A man at the candle table counted coins with slow care. After a quiet pause, a child watched a kite string spool being repaired and looked as if the act was magic. A dog lay in the shade and blinked slowly at the world as if the market was only a pleasant breeze. Mara walked between stalls with the same calm attention that had served her at the pier. Then something did not fit. A tin sat on the edge of a crate near the spice cellar, just resting as if someone had set it down and then been pulled away by a moment. The tin was old biscuit tin size. Its lid was slightly dented. Parcel paper wrapped around it like a belt, tied with twine that lay flat and neat. On the paper was a dab of wax. Sea blue as always, but today it carried a bright citrus tint, as if the blue had been stirred with sunlight. The impression was not a shell, not the pier's star. It looked like a small drop, rounded, tapering, like a candy drawn with one simple stroke. Mara stepped closer and waited a second, letting the lane keep moving around her. No one reached for the tin. The spice seller was busy weighing cloves and speaking to a customer. 2 people behind Mara compared jars of honey. The ribbon woman laughed softly at something a neighbor said. The dog stayed still, eyes half closed. By the bookstall, the tin remained. Fingers found the parcel paper and lifted it carefully. The twine loosened easily, not knotted tight, only wrapped with intention. The wax held just enough to say, "This is closed for now." A low stone ledge offered a quiet place to pause. Mara sat with the tin on a lap, hands still, letting the market noise soften into the background. Citrus and sugar rose before the lid even opened. Something clean and familiar. The wax broke gently. The parcel paper slipped away in one smooth piece. Under it, the tin lid showed a faded flower pattern that had once been bright. When the lid lifted, the scent became clear. Lemon drops, wrapped, neat. Each one twisted at the ends like a small gift. A note sat on top, folded once. Cream paper, thick enough to hold ink without bleeding. Handwriting tidy and steady, the same hand as before. Dear Mara, a tin can travel farther than a letter. Today it brings sweetness. This tin belongs to a woman who trades ribbons in Market Lane. She keeps lemon drops for the long days when her hands work without stopping. Yesterday she set the tin down to help a child whose kite string snapped. When she returned, the tin was gone. You will find her at the ribbon stall under the pale striped awning. She wears a thimble on her middle finger and keeps her ribbon ends tied with a small knot that looks like a bow. Return the tin without making her feel foolish. Offer a trade if it helps. A lemon drop for a length of ribbon. A smile for a small story. On the stones, a quiet kindness for a quiet kindness. Afterward, look at the underside of the ribbon stall counter. There is a mark pressed there. It will not be the pier's star. It will not be the step's shell. In Market Lane, it will belong to Market Lane. With care, a friend of the coast. The note was read twice, first for direction, then for tone. A tin can travel farther than a letter. That sounded like the coast speaking in the language it preferred. Objects, marks, small routes made of ordinary things. The note folded into the notebook. Then the tin closed again. Parcel paper wrapped back around it, not sealed, only kept tidy. Twine looped once, then twice, and held without knots. The ribbon stall was not far. Pale striped awning, hands that worked. A thimble catching light. At the ribbon table, the woman arranged spools by color. Not strict order. Only the order her hands understood. The thimble flashed once as a ribbon end became a small bow knot, quick and sure. Her face looked kind and slightly tired in the way a long market day can make anyone. Mara approached from the side and waited until the woman looked up. "Hi," Mara said. The woman's eyes lifted. "Hi," she replied. "Looking for ribbon?" "Maybe," Mara said. "I think I'm looking for this first." The tin landed on the table gently. Relief showed first, quick and involuntary. Then embarrassment tried to cover it. "Oh," the woman said. "My tin. It was sitting by the spice crates," Mara replied, like it was waiting for the right hands. The woman exhaled. "I must have set it down," she said. "I never set it down, except I did." "It happens," Mara said. "No harm done." Fingers checked the familiar dent and the worn edge. Shoulders lowered as if something unclenched. "Thank you," the woman said. "I keep those for the long days." "I was thinking," Mara said. "It feels wrong to return a tin without a trade." The woman's mouth twitched, almost amused. "This is Market Lane," she said. "Trades are how we speak." From the coat pocket came Elias's small bag. One lemon drop was held out. "One lemon drop," Mara said, "for one length of ribbon." The woman laughed softly. "That is a very sweet trade," she said. A spool was chosen, and a length cut, blue with a faint gold thread running through it. The color matched the Seaglass token in memory, and the gold matched the wax streak from the parcel paper star. The ribbon folded into a neat loop and rested in Mara's palm. "There," the woman said. "Now we both have something." The lemon drop rested beside the tin. "My grandmother loved these," the woman said, turning the candy once between her fingers. "Always said they make a day feel shorter." Mara nodded. "In a quiet way," she said. The candy was set aside for later, not rushed. Then the woman looked closer. "You're Mara," she said. "Yes," Mara said. "How do you know?" The woman smiled. "Market Lane knows everyone," she said. "And you're the one who always seems to arrive where all thing needs doing." Warmth rose, steady and uncomplicated. "It's just my roots," Mara said. "Well," the woman replied, "your roots brought my tin back." A simple check happened without fuss. A brief brush of fingers along the underside of the counter edge. There was a pressed mark in the wood, not a shell, not a star, a small drop shape, rounded and tapering, like the wax impression on the parcel paper. The fingertip traced it once, then straightened as if only checking for splinters. Ribbons reclaimed the woman's attention. The moment passed without making itself important. The ribbon went into the canvas bag, folded once so it would not tangle. After a quiet pause, the Seaglass token stayed in its pocket. The notebook rested against it, holding letters and star paper like quiet receipts of kindness. Mara stepped back into the lane. Midday rhythm had settled in. People moved slower now. Trades happened with less chatter. The air smelled of bread and spices and warm cloth. The oats went to the corner shop. After a quiet pause, the cloth went to the neighbor by the window. The honey went to Elias, who accepted it with a nod that meant even. Later that afternoon, Market Lane began to loosen. Awnings fluttered gently as the wind shifted. A basket was emptied and stacked. A stall holder swept a small circle of crumbs into the street, as if feeding the pigeons without announcing it. Toward evening, the harbor steps waited as they always did. The rail was cool under a resting palm. The shell mark was still beneath it, unchanged. Across the square, the pier had its star. Market Lane had its drop. The steps had their shell. 3 places, 3 symbols, 1 route taking shape. At her table, the notebook opened to a blank page. The ribbon lay beside the parcel paper star, blue and gold against brown paper. The Seaglass token caught lamplight and looked deeper at the center, pale at the edges. No prediction was needed. No solving was required. The town had taught something simpler. Carry what is placed in your hands. Return what belongs. Trade sweetness for sweetness. Let the root appear in its own time. Later that evening, Market Lane looked different after most stalls had closed. The stones held faint marks where baskets had rested. A few ribbon scraps clung to the curb like quiet leftovers. Near the pale-striped awning, the counter edge held its small drop mark in silence. Knowing it was there was enough. Before bed, a single lemon drop waited in a small dish on the shelf. It was not eaten right away. Sweetness can wait, the way letters wait, the way marks wait under rails. In lamplight, the candy looked like a small sun held in glass. Toward sleep, the Seaglass token cooled on the windowsill for a minute, and then returned to its pocket. In the morning, awnings would rise again, and baskets would return to their places. Somewhere in that familiar setup, another small object would wait, as if it had always belonged to the lane. The coast did not demand attention. It offered it, quietly. After leaving the ribbon stall, Mara stayed in Market Lane longer than she needed to. Not to search, only to let the small traits settle into the day like sugar dissolving in tea. A pottery table had been set up near the square. Mugs lined up in soft colors, some glazed like sea foam, some like sand after rain. The potter offered 1 mug in exchange for a bundle of dried lavender. No money changed hands. Only a nod and a quiet smile, as if the agreement was older than the people making it. Mara watched for a moment and then moved on. The coast seemed to approve of trades that did not make anyone feel lesser. That was the kind of language it had been using with her too. Near the candle cellar, a young man was trying to decide between 2 scents. One smelled like cedar, one smelled like lemon peel. He held both, uncertain, then laughed at himself. "I can't tell which one fits," he said to no one in particular. A woman beside him said, "Take the one you'll actually light." Her tone was kind, not sharp. The young man smiled and chose the cedar. Mara liked the advice. It was simple. It made room for real life. On the stones, it sounded like something Mrs. Kitt might say at the post desk, the way she keeps things practical without taking away the warmth. At the post desk, Mrs. Kitt was sorting a stack of envelopes with slow precision. She looked up once, read Mara's face, the way she read handwriting, and then went back to her work. No questions came, no demands for explanation, only that quiet permission to be in the middle of something without having to defend it. Mara left a small note for a neighbor and stepped back into the lane. The bell on the post desk door made its shy sound. Then it was quiet again. Under the awnings, the ribbon woman opened the tin and checked the lemon drops as if counting comfort. She did not look after Mara. She did not call her back. The trade had done its job. That felt right. Kindness that lands and then releases. No strings, no obligations. Only a small circle completed. On the walk toward home, Mara passed the harbor stacks and stopped for a moment. The rail felt cool under her hand. The shell mark waited beneath, unchanged. Later that afternoon, the pier star had felt like a place marker. Market Lane's drop felt like a promise of sweetness. The shell at the steps felt like memory. 3 signs, each with its own feel. 3 stops along her day. One route beginning to show itself like a line drawn lightly on a map. After the last lamp dimmed, the house settled into a quiet that felt familiar rather than empty. The ribbon waited in the notebook like a gentle bookmark. The tin rested on the shelf with its dented lid and its neat candies. Across the square, the Seaglass token stayed cool in its pocket, patient as tide. Nothing needed to be decided tonight. The coast would keep speaking in its soft way when morning returned. After lunch, the ribbon woman sent a small boy to deliver a folded length of ribbon to a seamstress down the lane. The boy held it like a treasure and walked carefully so it would not drag. When he arrived, the seamstress traded him a warm bun in return and told him to eat it slowly because hot bread deserves respect. The boy nodded, as if this was serious work. Watching that small exchange made the afternoon feel grounded. Market Lane did not run on money alone. It ran on trust, on habits, on people remembering what matters to other people. Across the square, a woman at the herb table offered a sprig of rosemary to anyone who looked tired. No charge, just a simple kindness. The rosemary smelled sharp and clean, and it made Mara think of the letters again, the way the wax always carried that quiet scent of an herb drawer. The herb woman noticed the look and said, "Old trick. Paper likes to live near rosemary, keeps it in good mood." Then she smiled at her own sentence and returned to her bundles. Near the spice crates, the seller finally saw the empty space where the tin had been. He frowned, then relaxed when he noticed the parcel paper wrapper left neatly folded at the edge of the crate, as if someone had borrowed the tin and still respected the paper. He picked up the wrapper, turned it once, and shrugged. "Market Lane is full of mysteries," he said to his customer. The customer replied, "Most of them are small. That's the best kind." Later, the lane quieted, and a soft wind slid under the awnings. A ribbon end fluttered like a small flag. A paper tag lifted and settled again. Everything moved, but nothing felt unsettled. Mara walked past the candle table and noticed a new candle scent, labeled simply lemon. The label was handwritten, careful and plain. The maker caught her glance and said, "People like a clean smell after winter." Mara nodded and kept walking, letting that simple truth sit beside the tin's sweetness. At the harbor shed, the table held its familiar stripe of light. Mara set the notebook down and opened it to the page with the parcel paper corner. The corner still looked like the beginning of a shape. The star still sat pressed between pages. At her table, the ribbons blue and gold made the paper look richer. It felt like the notebook was becoming a small collection of roots, not by writing, but by keeping the right objects close together. Rowan's place up the hill smelled of pine needles and faint wood smoke. When Mara arrived, Rowan did not ask why. He only asked, "Tea?" Mara said yes, because the day had been full. While the kettle warmed, Mara mentioned the tin, the ribbon trade, and the drop mark under the counter. Rowan listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Old roots had symbols for stops, not for secrets. For remembering." That sentence settled like a stone in a pocket. Simple weight, useful weight. Back in town, Elias was closing the bakery when Mara passed. He waved a flour-dusted hand and asked if the lemon drops had behaved themselves. Mara said one had traveled farther than expected. Elias laughed and said, "That's what sweets do. They go where the day needs them." He handed over a small bag with 2 warm rolls. "No trade," Elias said, "just because." Mara thanked him and tucked them into her bag, like an extra layer of comfort. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit pinned a new notice to the board. "Found, tin, lemon sweets, returned." The note did not name who had found it and did not name who owned it. It only confirmed that small things come back when they are handled with care. Mara read the notice and felt a steady satisfaction. Not pride, just the quiet sense of a town doing what it does best. At home, Mara placed the ribbon beside the star and slid the note from the tin between notebook pages. Then, she opened the drawer that held the wax fragments and added the tiny citrus-tinted wax piece she had saved from the tin seal. It looked different from the others. Not better, only different. That mattered. The coast was changing the mark slightly each time, like handwriting that stays recognizable while shifting with mood. Before sleep, Mara set the tin on the windowsill for a minute and watched the streetlight reflect off its dented lid. The reflection made a small bright crescent, like a thin moon on metal. Mara smiled at the shape and then moved the tin back to the shelf. The day had given sweetness and asked for a soft trade in return. That felt fair. In the early hours, the town rested. Market Lane stones cooled. Awnings hung still. The harbor kept moving in its quiet way. The shell mark under the steps stayed. By the bookstall, the star mark under the pier rail stayed. The drop mark under the ribbon counter stayed. The coast was not rushing to reveal anything. It was drawing a route with patience. Mara would follow it the way she followed any good route, one steady step at a time. After a quiet pause, Mara walked back through Market Lane and noticed the child with the kite again. The string had been repaired, and the kite was folded now, tucked under an arm like a promise for the next windy day. The child's hands were sticky with something sweet. Lemon sugar, probably, from a candy offered by someone who saw small disappointment and refused to let it linger. Mara did not interrupt. She only watched the scene long enough to feel the town's softness. Then she kept walking. Under the awnings, a small table of old stamps sat beside a box of postcards. The seller was an older man with ink-stained fingertips who spoke softly, as if loud words might smudge paper. He showed a stamp with a lighthouse and said it was from a route that no longer exists. He showed another with a shell and said some routes keep repeating, even when names change. Mara did not buy anything. Still, the sight of old stamps made the changing wax impressions feel less strange. The coast could be old-fashioned without being outdated. Near the candle stall, the maker offered a soft tray to a woman who had forgotten her coins. A candle for a jar of jam, the maker said, and the woman agreed with visible relief. The jam was homemade, and the label read apricot in careful letters. The candle maker held the jar up as if it was gold and said, "Perfect. Now my kitchen smells like summer." Mara smiled and moved on, thinking how trades can rescue dignity as easily as they rescue a day. Across the square, a small basket of lemons sat beside a bowl of Seaglass pieces for children to look at. The lemon seller said the Seaglass was not for taking, only for touching and putting back, to learn what the ocean makes over time. A child held up a pale green piece and asked if it used to be a bottle. The lemon seller said, "Probably. Now it's just itself." Mara felt the sentence settle in a quiet corner of her mind. The Seaglass token in the pocket felt suddenly warmer, as if it approved. Inside the shed, the envelope of wax fragments opened again. A small citrus-tinted piece sat beside the sea blue pieces from earlier days. The difference was slight, yet it mattered, like a change in handwriting that only a careful reader would notice. Mara placed a tiny label beside it that read "Drop." No date, no flourish, only a word that would make sense later. Then the envelope closed, and the day moved on. Toward evening, Rowan's words returned again, symbols for remembering, not to hide anything. That idea made the whole arc feel steadier. The coast was not playing tricks. It was marking a route the way a person marks a page in a book, so the story can be found again. Mara liked that thought. It made patience feel like part of the craft. In the hours before dawn, the harbor kept its slow conversation with stone. Market Lane stayed dark, but not empty, because the town's care was still there even when doors were closed. The shell under the steps, the star under the pier rail, and the drop under the ribbon counter would all be waiting when morning arrived. The route was becoming a gentle habit, and Mara would keep following it, one small kindness at a time. When morning came, the first thing to appear would be twine, then paper, then bread, without rushing, then voices. The coast would not shout over any of it. It would simply place the next small clue where steady eyes could find it. Later, when the next day's stall holders were already thinking about their tables, Market Lane held a kind of quiet preparation. Someone left a clean cloth folded at the edge of a counter, so morning wiping would be easier. Someone else tucked a fresh piece of twine into a jar, ready for tying parcels without searching. A woman carried empty baskets home and kept her steps gentle so the handles would not clatter. Even the dog in the shade changed position and sighed as if the lane was his job to oversee. The coast's letter had asked for a soft trade, and the lane had answered in its own way. A tin returned, a ribbon exchanged. Under the awnings, a small mark discovered where only careful hands would look. Nothing about it was dramatic. That was the point. The route was being drawn with ordinary tools: paper, wax, a bit of sugar, a line of ribbon, the kind of items that pass through hands every day without fanfare. This time, those items carried meaning. They carried direction. They carried proof that care can travel quietly and still arrive. Before turning in, Mara opened the notebook one last time and laid the ribbon across the page with the star. Blue and gold against brown paper, a small tin on the shelf, a drop mark under a counter. Across the square, a star under a rail, a shell under another rail. The story was not finished. Still, the pieces were beginning to hold together like a map corner pinned down at the right points. Mara closed the notebook gently and let the night be quiet. In the quiet between night sounds, Mara thought about the ribbon woman's small embarrassment and the way it had passed as soon as the tin returned. No teasing, no big fuss, just a steady return and a trade that made both sides feel respected. That was the kind of safety the coast seemed to favor. Not silence, not perfection, just the promise that small mistakes do not have to become stories about who someone is. Tomorrow, another object might appear with another seal. Another symbol might wait under another edge of wood. When it did, Mara would meet it the same way she met the tin today, with steady hands, with a soft trade, in Market Lane, with care that does not demand applause. The coast would send its next nudge soon. Chapter 5. The Blue Stamp That Shouldn't Exist. The morning smelled like clean salt and wet stone. Sunlight was there, but thin, filtered through a veil of coastal haze. It made the harbor look soft around the edges, as if the day had decided to speak gently. On the harbor steps, the rail waited with its familiar coolness. A hand rested on it for a moment. Beneath the underside, the small shell mark remained, unchanged, pressed into wood that had held many seasons. The Seaglass token stayed tucked in the inner pocket of Mara's canvas bag. Folded letters rested beside it. The notebook lay flat against them, holding the parcel paper star and the blue ribbon with its faint gold thread. Those things did not feel heavy. They felt like a route being drawn in quiet ink. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit was already working. Envelopes lined up in a neat stack. Twine sat in a small dish. A stamp pad waited with its lid closed, as if it was saving its color. The bell above the door made its shy sound when Mara stepped inside. Mrs. Kit looked up. No surprise showed in her face, only a calm recognition, the way a person recognizes weather. "There's something for you," Mrs. Kit said. The words were simple, still they made the room feel slightly brighter. A letter waited on the counter. Not large, not dramatic, just a cream envelope with clean edges and a careful fold. On the corner was a stamp. It was not wax this time. It was a printed stamp in deep blue ink. So blue it looked almost black until light hit it. Then it flashed a clear cobalt like a piece of the sea held still. The stamp showed a lighthouse, a simple line drawing, a circle of waves beneath it. Without rushing, a small star tucked near the base. Mrs. Kit watched Mara's eyes move to it. "That stamp shouldn't exist," she said quietly. Mara blinked once. "What do you mean?" she asked. Mrs. Kit tapped the envelope with one fingernail. "Old route," she said. "Retired years ago. We stopped using that plate. The post office in the city sent them back, or they were supposed to." Mara did not feel fear, only that gentle tightening of attention that comes when a puzzle piece looks right and wrong at the same time. "How do you know it's the old one?" Mara asked. Mrs. Kit lifted the envelope slightly and pointed to the tiny star. "It's the little star," she said. "New lighthouse stamps have a crescent moon. That star was only on the coastal route plates." Mara looked again. The star was small, tidy, like a signature no one expected anyone to notice. The envelope had no return address, no sender, only Mara's name, written in the same steady hand as before. Mrs. Kit lowered her voice. "Whoever is doing this," she said, "knows paper, knows routes, knows old habits." She paused, then added, "and knows you'll treat it gently." Mara nodded. "That part is easy," she said. The envelope opened with a soft pull, just paper parting the way paper does when it's respected. Inside was a letter, folded once. A small square of parcel paper came with it, wrapped around something hard and flat. A token, not seaglass this time, a thin piece of driftwood, smoothed on one edge. Pressed into it was a tiny circle. Inside the circle was a lighthouse shape, and beneath it, a small drop mark. Mara turned it in her fingers. The wood felt warm already, as if it had been held recently. The letter's handwriting was the same tidy script. "Dear Mara, today the stamp is blue. It should not exist, and yet it arrived. That is how the coast works. Old things return when they are needed. Walk the lighthouse path. Bring the blue ribbon with you. On the headland, the lighthouse keeper's warm room is open today. It opens only on certain days, when wind is kind and the steps are safe. Inside, you will find a table with a tin kettle and a basket of small towels. A woman will be there, wrapping mugs in cloth so they do not clink. He carries a small bruise on his thumb from closing a window too quickly yesterday. Offer a soft trade, a ribbon for a story, a lemon drop for a warm mug. In the warm room, a small help for a small help. There is a blue stamp on the table that does not belong. It is a stamp plate. It should have been returned years ago. You do not need to take it. You only need to place it where it belongs. Look beneath the window ledge. There is a mark pressed there. It will be neither shell, nor star, nor drop. It will belong to the lighthouse path. With care, a friend of the coast. The letter was read twice. First for direction, then for the way it held the day with gentle hands. Take the lighthouse path. Make a soft trade. Place the stamp plate where it belongs. Mara folded the letter and slid it into the notebook behind the other notes. The driftwood token went into the inner pocket beside the sea glass piece. Wood against glass, warm against cool. Mrs. Kit watched the movements without asking questions. "The headland path is clear," she said. "Not muddy. Wind is mild." Mara nodded. "Then it's a good day," she said. Outside, the lane opened toward the dunes. The blue ribbon came out of the notebook and looped into a pocket so it would not snag. The lemon drops from the tin went into another pocket, wrapped and ready, sweet without being messy. Along the dunes, the lighthouse path began as a pale ribbon of sand. It curved gently, never steep, always inviting. Grass moved in small waves. The air smelled of salt and sun-warmed driftwood. A gull stood on a post and watched, then decided nothing dramatic was happening and looked away. The path climbed slowly toward the headland. The lighthouse appeared in pieces at first, a white edge, a gray line, then the full tower, steady against the sky, like a quiet promise that never learned how to be impatient. Near the base, a small building sat tucked from the wind. Its door was open. Warmth drifted out. Not hot air, just the soft warmth of a room that knows how to welcome. Inside, the air smelled of tea and clean cloth. A kettle sat on a small stove, not boiling, just ready. A basket of towels waited on a chair. Inside the shed, a shelf held old logbooks and a few postcards in a neat stand. A woman stood by the table, wrapping mugs in cloth so they would not clink. Her motions were careful. Her hands moved like someone who respects quiet. She looked up and smiled. "Hi," she said. "Come in." Mara stepped into the warm room. The wind noise softened behind the door. The lighthouse felt close now, not looming, just present. On the table sat a stamp, not the blue-printed stamp from the envelope. A metal stamp plate, small and heavy, with the lighthouse design carved into it. The tiny star, the circle of waves. On the lighthouse path, the old route mark. It sat there like it had been forgotten, or like it had decided to wait. The woman noticed Mara's eyes on it. "Oh," she said, "that old thing." Her voice held affection and mild annoyance at the same time, the way someone speaks about a stubborn drawer that sticks every winter. "It shouldn't be here," Mara said gently. The woman nodded. "I know," she said. "It was supposed to be returned ages ago. My uncle kept it. He said it was just a piece of history. Then he passed and everything in the house came to me. This room too. The stamp plate too." She shrugged slightly. "Every time I think about bringing it in, the day gets busy. Then it sits again." Mara did not hear laziness in that, only life. On the stove, the kettle gave a soft tick as it warmed. No whistle, no sudden sound. A man at the window turned slightly. He was rolling a cloth between his hands, drying the ledge. His thumb had a small bruise, purple at the edge, tender but not serious. He noticed Mara and gave a small nod. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Mara replied. The woman set a wrapped mug down and continued wrapping another. "I'm Lisa," she said, "keeper of this warm room on the days it's open." Mara nodded. "I'm Mara," she said. Lisa smiled. "I know," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. The line in the letter returned, "Keep the trade gentle." Mara pulled the blue ribbon from her pocket. It looked even richer in the warm light, the gold thread catching in small sparks along the weave. "I brought something," Mara said. "A ribbon." Lisa lifted her eyebrows. "That's lovely," she said. "Are you trading?" "If you're willing," Mara said, "for a story." Lisa laughed, soft and pleased. "This is the best kind of trade," she said. The ribbon slid across the table. Lisa touched it as if touching a small kindness makes it real. In exchange, Lisa reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin booklet. Not a logbook, not official, a small handmade booklet, pages tied with string. "Stories of the headland," she said. "Visitors leave one line sometimes, not many, just enough to say I was here and I saw something gentle." Lisa opened it to a page with a blank space. "Write one line," she said, "if you want." Mara did not want to make it a performance, so the line stayed simple. "A warm room can be a lighthouse too," she wrote. Then the booklet closed. The man at the window offered a mug, wrapped in cloth. Steam rose in a soft curl. Lisa nodded toward him. "That's Bram," she said. "He helps on open days. He also closes windows too fast, apparently." Bram lifted the bruised thumb slightly and smiled. "Lesson learned," he said. Mara reached into the other pocket and pulled out a lemon drop. "A lemon drop," she said, "for that warm mug." Bram's smile widened. "Fair," he said. He set the mug in Mara's hands. The cloth made it quiet. The warmth traveled through fingers without rushing. On the stones, the lemon drop went onto a small saucer by the stove, waiting. Now the stamp plate sat there again, heavy and out of place. Mara did not take it like a thief. She did not make it a dramatic act. She only said, "Would it help if we put it where it belongs?" Lisa exhaled. Relief moved through her face the way it had moved through the ribbon woman's face when the tin returned. Yes, she said, it would. A small cabinet stood by the door. Inside were items meant for the lighthouse, spare wicks, a roll of cloth, a little tin of screws. In the warm room, a small wooden box labeled Post. Lysa opened the box. Inside were a few postcards in a stamped envelope addressed to the city post office. See, she said, I even started the return. She looked at the stamp plate, then at Mara. Will you? Lysa asked. Mara nodded. I will, she said. The stamp plate went into the wooden box. It fit as if the box had been waiting for it. Lysa's shoulders lowered. Bram returned to the window and finished drying the ledge. Then he stepped away and held the cloth like he had finished an important job. Look beneath the window ledge, the letter had said. Mara leaned down as if checking the sill for draft. Fingers brushed the underside of the ledge. A mark was pressed into the wood. Not a shell, not a star. At the bookstall, not a drop. A circle. Inside it, a small line pointed outward, like a compass needle. Not a full compass, a hint of direction. Mara traced it once, then straightened. The mark belonged to the lighthouse path. Direction, steady guidance, a gentle point toward home. In the warm room, tea tasted clean. The lemon scent from the candy lingered faintly in the air. The kettle ticked softly. By the harbor steps, the lighthouse tower stood outside, like a quiet guardian that did not need to shout. After a few minutes, Mara rose. I should go, Mara said. Lysa nodded. Thank you, she said. For the trade, for the help. Thank you for making it feel simple. It can be simple, Mara replied. Most things can, if they're handled gently. Bram gave a small nod. Safe walk back, he said. The door opened. Wind met Mara again, mild and clean. On the path back, the headland looked different. Not changed, just connected. The pier's star, Market Lane's drop, the harbor steps shell, the lighthouse path's compass hint. 4 places, 4 symbols, 1 route taking shape. At the bottom of the dunes, the harbor appeared again in soft light. The steps waited. The rail felt cool under a resting hand. With the tide turning, the shell mark remained beneath, unchanged. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit looked up when Mara returned. The stamp plate, she said. Not a question, only a quiet check. It's on its way, Mara replied. In the right box. Mrs. Kit nodded once. Good, she said. Old things should be stored kindly, or returned kindly. Same principle. Back at home, the notebook opened. The driftwood token rested beside the Seaglass piece, wood beside glass. The blue ribbon was gone now, traded for a small booklet and a storyline. Toward the headland, the wax fragment envelope stayed shut. No new wax today, only blue ink and old metal. In the quiet, the route felt steadier, not solved, just held. Tomorrow would bring another nudge. The coast would place it gently, and steady hands would meet it when the moment was ready. Later that evening, a soft fog slid in from the water and made the harbor lamps look like small moons. Nothing was hidden in a scary way. Everything was simply softened. By the window, the driftwood token warmed in Mara's hand. The wood held heat longer than expected. It smelled faintly of sun and salt, like a board that has lived outside and learned patience. The compass hint mark under the lighthouse window ledge stayed in mind. Not an order, a suggestion, direction without pressure. Later, the headland wind softened even more, and the lighthouse windows caught a little sun. The warm room's door stayed open for a while, inviting anyone who needed a quiet pause to step in. Inside, towels waited, mugs waited, and stories waited in their small string-tied booklet. Nothing insisted, everything offered. Later that evening, The wooden box labeled post sat on the warm room table, with its lid closed. It looked ordinary. Still, it held a piece of history that was finally ready to travel. Lysa tied the box with twine, the way a careful person ties a parcel, snug without strain. The driftwood token warmed in a pocket, and the Seaglass token cooled beside it. Wood and glass felt like a small reminder that the coast uses more than one kind of language. Sometimes it writes in ink. Sometimes it writes in marks pressed under wood. By the harbor steps, sometimes it writes in objects that change hands through kindness. As evening settled, the wooden box labeled post rested on the warm room table, lid shut. It looked plain at first glance, yet it carried a small bit of history that was finally ready to move on. Lysa secured it with twine, neat and firm, the way parcels are tied when care matters. After leaving the post desk, Mara walked the lane slowly and watched morning build itself. A shopkeeper brushed salt off a doorstep with a soft broom. A fisherman set a coil of rope down with care, as if rope deserves kindness too. Toward the headland, a dog lifted his head at the smell of bread and then settled again. The blue stamp stayed in mind, not because it was frightening, because it was precise. Someone had chosen it on purpose, not for drama, but for meaning. On the way toward the dunes, Mara stopped at the bookstall again. Ansel was restacking postcards and humming under his breath, a tune that sounded like it belonged to old paper. Mara asked one question. "Have you ever seen that lighthouse stamp?" she said. Ansel did not look surprised. He only nodded once. "Long ago," he replied. "The old coastal plate. Collectors wanted it. Route workers loved it. Then it disappeared." "Disappeared?" Mara repeated. "Retired," Ansel corrected gently. "Things don't vanish. They move into drawers." That sentence felt useful. A stamp plate in a drawer. A warm room with a box labeled post. In the lane, a route waking up again. Along the dunes, the wind carried a faint smell of rosemary from somewhere inland. It was not strong, only a hint. It made the coast's letters feel closer, like the writer had walked this same sand and tucked paper into an herb drawer out of habit. Grasses leaned and lifted. Sand held footprints without gripping them. The path did not feel like a test. It felt like an invitation to keep going. Halfway up the headland, a low bench sat in the shade of a weathered fence. Mara rested there and watched the water change color. Clouds moved slowly and made patches of silver on the surface. A small boat crossed one bright patch and then another, steady and unhurried. In the pocket, the driftwood token pressed lightly against the sea glass. Warm wood against cool glass felt like balance. The coast seemed to like pairs, a shell and a star, a drop and a compass hint, paper and wax, old routes and new days. In the warm room, the little booklet of headland lines was opened again. Lysa turned to the page where Mara had written and smiled at the sentence like it was a candle being lit. Bram read it too, then nodded once, as if the words had done their job. A warm room can be a lighthouse too. Lysa tapped the page with one fingertip. "My uncle would have liked that," she said. "He thought lighthouses were more than towers." Bram added, "He used to say the best signals are the quiet ones." The kettle ticked softly on the stove. Mugs waited, wrapped. Towels waited, folded. Nothing clinked, nothing shouted. Lysa offered a small tour without making it a tour. She pointed out the shelf of logbooks, not for show, only so someone could see where the years lived. Each book had a date on its spine and a small symbol beside it. A shell for winter storms that never arrived loudly here, a star for nights when the sky was clear and the sea looked like dark glass. By the harbor steps, a drop for days when someone left sweets for the workers. Mara noticed one symbol that looked like a tiny compass point. Not the whole compass, only a hint. Lysa saw the glance and said, That one means visitors. Days when the path was open. In the coming days, the box would reach the city post office. The old plate would be placed where it belonged. The lighthouse line drawing would return to a drawer, not hidden, only stored with respect. A route can be honored without being clung to. That felt like the coast's lesson. In the afternoon, Mara stopped by the ribbon stall again, not to ask for anything, only to pass through Market Lane and feel its ordinary steadiness. The ribbon woman was tying ends into small bow knots, quick and practiced, as if knots were a kind of punctuation. She looked up, smiled and nodded, as if to say the tin had stayed safe and the day had moved on. No explanation was needed. At the corner shop, the older dog was on his usual step, chin on paws, eyes half closed in the sun. When Mara walked by, the dog's tail thumped once against the wood, slow and satisfied. A single oat biscuit was placed beside him. He did not grab it. He waited, polite as ever, until Mara had walked on. Small arrangements, quiet respect. The town was full of it. Near the harbor shed, the table held the same stripe of light it always did in mid-afternoon. Mara opened the notebook and traced the pressed folds of the parcel paper star with one fingertip. The star was not perfect anymore. It was close enough. That felt right. In the margin of a page, 3 words were written in small letters: shell, star, drop. A 4th word waited for the lighthouse path. Back at the warm room, Lysa added another towel to the basket and adjusted the mugs in their cloth wraps. The work looked small. Still, it kept the room gentle. Bram wiped the window ledge with slow care, then set the cloth down as if finishing something important. A warm room is made out of tiny choices. That seemed to be the point. At the post desk, Mrs. Kit reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin booklet of old route notes. She did not hand it to Mara. She only read one line aloud, as if testing whether the room could hold it. "Return what belongs," she said. Then the booklet went back into the drawer. Mrs. Kit looked up and added, "That's how routes stay kind." On the headland, the lighthouse tower cast a thin shadow that moved slowly as clouds passed. The shadow did not feel ominous. It felt like a clock hand, steady and honest. At the base, the small building held its warmth without showing off. A person could walk that path many times and never notice the little marks, or a person could notice once and then see the route everywhere. Later that evening, the driftwood token and the Seaglass token sat side by side on the table for a moment. Wood looked matte. Glass caught light. Together they looked like 2 parts of the same coast, one shaped by sand, one shaped by sea. Mara placed them back where they belonged. The day did not need to be displayed. It only needed to be carried forward. Before sleep, the notebook stayed open on the table long enough for lamplight to touch the pages. The letters rested in their quiet stack. The blue stamp in memory stayed vivid. Deep cobalt, clean line work, a small star no one should have printed anymore. Old things can return without causing trouble. They can return as guidance. They can return as a reminder to handle history with care. In the quiet hours, the route felt like a set of gentle reminders, rather than a mystery to conquer. The shell mark under the arbor rail stayed patient. The star mark under the pier rail stayed hidden until someone chose to look. The drop mark under the ribbon counter stayed tucked under the edge, like a secret meant to be safe. The compass hint under the lighthouse window ledge stayed steady, pointing without pushing. Tomorrow, another letter might arrive with another small change in seal or stamp. The coast would not ask for speed, it would ask for care, and that was something Mara could always offer. In the morning, Lysa planned to bring the wooden box to the post desk herself. She said it out loud once, as if words make plans stick. Bram agreed to walk with her, not because she needed help, but because a walk on the dunes is nicer with company. They would carry the box the way people carry something fragile, even when the object is metal. It was fragile in a different way. It held history. The path from the headland to town felt shorter when it was walked with a purpose that was kind. At the post desk, Mrs. Kit would place the returned plate in a back shelf where old route items lived, not hidden, not displayed, simply stored the way good tools are stored. There would be a little label, Old Coastal Plate, returned. The ink on the label would be plain, still it would mean something. The coast seemed to like plain labels. It made room for the real work, which was care. After the box was sent, the warm room would still open on the next calm day. Mugs would still be wrapped, towels would still be folded. Visitors would still come in with wind in their hair and quiet on their faces. The booklet of headland lines would take another sentence now and then. Most pages would stay blank. That was fine. A warm room is not measured by how much is written. It is measured by how safe it feels to sit down. That thought stayed with Mara like a soft scarf. When the next letter comes, it will likely change the stamp again. A crescent, a different star. By the harbor steps, a line that only Mrs. Kit would recognize. The route is learning how to speak in small variations, and Mara is learning how to listen without straining. Later that night, Mara placed the driftwood token in the notebook for a moment, just to see it beside the written pages. Wood grain ran in fine lines like a map. The pressed lighthouse circle looked simple, yet the edges were crisp, made by a careful hand. Beside it, the Seaglass token looked rounded and patient, its color deepening at the center under lamplight. 2 tokens, 2 textures, 1 route. Mara closed the notebook gently and set it back down. Outside, the harbor kept its quiet motion. The lighthouse kept its steady presence. Market Lane rested. The pier boards cooled. The steps held their show mark beneath the rail. Everything stayed where it belonged. That felt like a good ending for a day about returning old things with care. In the morning, the sea would look different again, but the route would remain steady. The coast does not hurry. It guides, and that guidance, quiet and consistent, is what makes the story feel safe. Another gentle letter would arrive when it was time, and the route would keep unfolding in small, kind steps. Chapter 6. The Letter Left in a Teacup. The conservatory sat at the edge of town, where the lane turned greener. Glass panes held the morning light. They softened it. They spread it across leaves and tiled stone, as if light could be poured like tea. Inside, the air was warmer than outside, not hot, just protected. It smelled faintly of soil, citrus peel, and damp clay pots. A long table ran down the middle, scarred by years of gentle use. Tea stains lived in small rings, wax strips had been scraped away. Someone had once drawn a tiny star in pencil near the far end and never erased it. Mara arrived with the canvas bag at her hip. In the inner pocket, the Seaglass token rested beside the driftwood piece from the headland. Letters sat in the notebook. The parcel paper star stayed pressed between pages. The lemon tin was not in the bag today. It was back where it belonged. The blue ribbon had already traveled. That empty space in the notebook felt like quiet proof of trade. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit had said one simple thing that morning. "Conservatory table," she had murmured. "No sender, no stamp I recognize, but it's yours." Mrs. Kit did not hand over an envelope. Instead, she pointed with her chin toward the lane and let the instructions stand on its own. So the walk brought Mara here. At the conservatory door, a small sign hung from twine. "Open, tea on, wipe your boots." Boots were wiped anyway. Old habits matter in places that welcome people. Inside, a man was watering a row of small pots. His motions were slow. He did not splash. He treated water like something that deserves respect. A woman at the far end of the table was folding cloth napkins into squares, not fancy shapes, only tidy squares that make cups feel cared for. They both looked up when Mara stepped in. "Morning," the man said. "Morning," Mara replied. The woman nodded and returned to her folding. No questions, no curiosity that demanded explanations, only that steady atmosphere that lets a person breathe. Tea was already laid out. A tray held a kettle, a sugar bowl, and a small dish of thin lemon slices. 3 cups waited on saucers. 2 were plain, one was patterned with pale blue leaves that matched nothing else on the tray. That mismatched cup drew the eye. It sat slightly apart, not hidden, just set aside as if it was waiting. At the base of the cup on the saucer, a tiny dab of wax held down a slip of paper. Sea blue again. Today it looked darker, like ink at the bottom of a bottle. Pressed into it was not a shell and not a star. It looked like a small leaf, simple, oval, with one line down the center. Hand stayed calm. The patterned cup lifted gently. Inside it was dry. No tea yet, just a folded note resting in the bottom, wrapped around a teaspoon like a small cradle. The note was cream paper, thick enough to hold ink without bleeding. The handwriting was tidy and steady, the same hand as before. Some letters travel in envelopes. Some travel in cups. Today the conservatory offers both warmth and quiet. A note was left in the wrong place yesterday. It belongs to a man who keeps the conservatory logbook. He writes down which plants were watered and which windows were opened. He also keeps the town's small kindness requests in the back pages. Yesterday he set a note in his teacup while he carried a tray. Then someone called his name and the cup was moved, and the note was forgotten. You will find him by the citrus trees near the far window. He wears a green apron and keeps a pencil behind his ear. There is a small tear in the apron pocket, where string caught last week. Return the note without making him feel careless. Offer a kind trade if it helps. A lemon slice for a story. A warm mug for a warm thank you. Later that afternoon, a small help for a small help. Afterward, look under the conservatory table. There is a mark pressed there. It will not be the shell of the harbor steps. It will not be the star of the pier. Under the panes it will not be the drop of Market Lane. It will not be the compass hint of the lighthouse path. It will belong to the conservatory. With care, a friend of the coast. The note was read twice, first for direction, then for tone. Some letters travel in cups. That sounded like the coast again, not dramatic, just precise. The letter folded into the notebook. The patterned cup stayed on the table for a moment, while the room remained quiet around it. Citrus trees stood near the far window. Their leaves were glossy. Small blossoms held a gentle perfume. The man with the watering can finished his row and set the can down. He wiped his hands on his apron, green and worn, pencil tucked behind his ear. Then he walked toward the citrus trees and checked the soil with one finger. The gesture was practiced, attentive but not anxious. Mara approached from the side and waited until he looked up. "Hi," Mara said. He smiled with the ease of someone who lives among plants. "Hi," he said. "Tea?" "Soon," Mara replied. "First, I think you're missing something." The patterned cup was carried over, steady in both hands. The folded note remained inside, dry and safe. The man looked into the cup and his face changed in a quiet way. Relief came first. Then embarrassment tried to cover it. "Oh," he said, "my note. It was in this cup," Mara said, "and it looked like it belonged to you." The man exhaled. "I must have set it down," he said. "I never set it down, except I did." "It happens," Mara said. "No harm done." He reached for the note, then paused. His fingers hovered as if he did not want to smudge anything. "Thank you," he said. "That's for the logbook and for the back pages." "The back pages," Mara repeated, light and curious, not pressing. He nodded. "Small requests," he said. "People leave them. I try to make sure someone sees them." That made the conservatory table feel like a second post desk. Warm air instead of paper stacks. Plants instead of stamps. Still a place where care is sorted and sent out. The note unfolded once in careful hands. It was not a secret. It was a list of 3 small things. A neighbor needed someone to carry 2 pots up the hill. A child needed a kite string repaired. At the conservatory, a visitor asked where to find the warm room on headland days. The man glanced at the list and smiled, a tired small smile. I keep thinking I'll copy it into the book, he said. Then I water plants and the day runs away. A day can run, Mara said. Still, it can be caught again. His eyebrows lifted. He smiled more fully. That's a good sentence, he said. Tea was still waiting on the table. The note had said, offer a kind trade if it helps. Mara lifted the thin lemon slice dish and carried it toward the citrus trees. 1 lemon slice, Mara said, for 1 story. That is a gentle trade, he said. He took the lemon slice and held it like a small, bright coin. Then he offered a story without fanfare. Some winters, he said, the conservatory closes early because the glass gets too cold. My grandmother used to bring a kettle anyway. She'd pour tea for anyone who came to check on the trees. She said warm hands keep plants brave. Mara nodded. I like her, she said. She'd like you, he replied, and she'd tell you to sit. So Mara sat at the long table. Tea was poured. Cloth wraps around mugs kept the room quiet. The woman folding napkins brought over a small plate of plain biscuits. No sugar glitter, just steady comfort. While tea warmed the hands, Mara looked at the list again. 2 pots up the hill, a kite string repair, a visitor asking about the warm room. Those were not mysteries. They were roots. They were kindness shaped into errands. Mara pointed to the pot's request. I can do that, she said. The man's shoulders lowered. Much appreciated, he said. The kite string repair line stayed on the page like a soft echo of earlier days. The warm room question felt like a thread to Lysa and Bram. Mara offered, I can write directions for that one, so you can copy it into the book. He nodded. His pencil came out from behind his ear. He was ready now, as if the note returning had given his day a small reset. A new page in the logbook opened. The cover was dark green. The paper inside was thick. It held ink without fuss. Mara wrote a short direction line for the warm room. Not long, just clear. Open on calm days. Follow the dunes path. Look for the door with towels and wrapped mugs. He copied it into the back pages, careful letters, like Mrs. Kitt's steady hand. Then he tucked the return note into the book as well, as proof that the request had been seen. Now the last instruction waited. Look under the conservatory table. Mara kept the movement ordinary, a bend as if reaching for a dropped napkin, a glance at the underside of wood that had held years of tea rings. Under the table edge, near the leg where shoes scuffed the floor, a mark was pressed into the wood. Not a shell, not a star. Inside the warm air, not a drop, not a compass hint. A leaf, the same simple oval leaf shape as the wax impression on the saucer. Mara traced it once with a fingertip. Then the hand rose again as if only brushing dust away. Tea finished. Biscuits disappeared slowly. The room held its warm quiet as if it was part of the structure, like glass and stone. After a while, Mara stood. I should go carry those pots, Mara said. The man smiled. I'm Jory, he said. Thank you again. Mara, she replied. Jory nodded. I know, he said, as simple as Lysa's, as if the town's route keepers share the same calm language. Outside, the lane felt cooler after the conservatory, still friendly, just less sheltered. 2 pots waited by the door, clay and a little heavy. A piece of twine was looped through their handles to make carrying easier. Mara lifted one, then the other. The weight was real. The errand was real. That mattered. Up the hill, Rowan's place sat near the pines. Rowan opened the door before Mara could knock, as if he had heard the clay handles tap softly together. You're carrying, Rowan said. Yes, Mara said. For a neighbor, from the conservatory. Rowan took 1 pot without making a big deal of it. He carried it steady and safe. At the neighbor's house, the pots were delivered. No speech, no fuss, only a thank you and a small smile that looked like relief. On the walk back down, the Seaglass token pressed cool against the driftwood in the pocket. Glass and wood, Leaf and compass hint, drop and star, shell waiting under the steps. The route was growing, not faster, just wider. At the harbor steps, a hand rested on the rail again. The shell mark remained beneath, steady, unchanged, a place you can return to. Back at home, the notebook opened to the page where the letter had been placed. The conservatory leaf was written in the margin as a single word, leaf, next to the earlier words, shell, star, drop, compass. 5 stops now, 5 symbols. The day had not asked for cleverness. It had asked for a return note, a kind trade, a small errand finished. That felt like the coast's way of saying the route is made of ordinary care. Tomorrow might bring another letter, or it might bring nothing at all. Either way, the conservatory would keep its glass light. The warm room would open on calm days. Market Lane would tie bows. The pier would hold its star beneath the rail, and the harbor stacks would keep their shell, patient as ever. Later that afternoon, the conservatory door opened again for 2 visitors who had come to see the citrus blossoms. Jory greeted them with the same calm steadiness. Tea was poured, and mugs were wrapped in cloth, not because glass is loud, but because quiet is a choice. Before they left, the visitors wrote one line in the back pages of the logbook, a thank you for warmth, nothing more. When the door closed, the room stayed gentle. Light shifted on the panes. Leaves held still for a moment as if listening. In the lane, the kite string repair request stayed in mind like a soft echo. A spool of string waited at the corner shop counter in a small basket. The owner said, "Take it. Bring it back when you can." That kind of trust is its own route. The spool went into the canvas bag, waiting for its moment. At the corner shop step, the older dog was in his usual place, chin on paws, eyes half closed in the pale sun. When Mara passed, the dog's tail thumped once against the wood, slow and satisfied. A small oat biscuit was set beside him. He waited until she had moved away before eating it. Even that felt like a kind trade. Respect given, respect received. With the spool of string in hand, Mara walked toward the open square where a few children were practicing simple kite folds. No one was upset. The broken string had become a small problem, not a disaster. A child held out the kite and asked if the string could be fixed. Mara tied a new length with a knot that felt familiar from Market Lane, neat and secure. The child watched closely, then tried the knot once more on his own. His second attempt was better than the first. A small skill shared is a kind of letter too. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit was sorting a stack of envelopes with her usual precision. She did not look surprised to see Mara again. She only asked, "Conservatory?" "Yes," Mara answered. "Leaf mark." Mrs. Kit nodded and made a short note in her ledger. Conservatory note returned. Leaf mark confirmed. Then the ledger closed, as if that was all it needed to do. Before Mara left, Mrs. Kit added, "People forget things in cups. It's better than forgetting them in worry." Rowan met Mara at the bottom of the hill later, carrying an empty basket. He asked without prying if the day had stayed gentle. Mara said it had. Rowan's face relaxed. "That's the right kind of mystery," he said. "The kind that makes you notice care." Rowan said he had once seen a leaf mark carved under a bench in the old garden years ago, not as decoration, as a reminder of where to sit when the wind is sharp, a mark for comfort, not for secrecy. That fit the conservatory perfectly. At the conservatory, the woman who folded napkins was rinsing cups now. She moved them through water with slow care and set them to dry on a towel. When she noticed Mara at the door, she smiled and pointed to the patterned cup. "That one always gets a note," she said, half joking. "Or it gets someone's attention." Mara smiled back. "That seems like a useful cup," she said. The woman nodded. "Useful is my favorite kind of thing," she replied. Then she returned to her rinsing, content to let the moment be ordinary again. Inside the glass house, Jory opened the logbook and copied the remaining request into the back pages. 2 pots carried, kite string repaired, warm room directions added. Each line was simple. Still, each one meant someone had been seen. Jory placed the pencil behind his ear again and said, "I can breathe now." Not as a complaint, as a fact. Mara understood. Small lists can feel heavy until the first line is crossed out. On the path behind the conservatory, small stones bordered a narrow garden bed. Someone had tucked a few pieces of sea glass along the edge, green and pale blue, like a quiet decoration. They were not the same as Mara's token. They were just cousins of it. Seeing them made Mara think of how the coast repeats shapes without repeating exactly. A shell might become a star. A star might become a leaf. Inside the warm air, a stamp might become a note in a cup. Same language, different letters. Toward evening, the conservatory light changed. Sun slipped lower and the panes turned the room into a soft lantern. People walked by and slowed down without knowing why. Warmth was visible there, not loud, just present. Inside, the long table held its familiar rings and marks. The leaf seal on the saucer had been cleaned away, but the pressed leaf under the table edge remained. Marks under wood are patient. They wait for careful hands. At home, the notebook opened again. The list of symbols sat on the page like a small map key. For a moment, shell. For a moment, star. Toward evening, for a moment, drop. For a moment, compass. For a moment, leaf. 5 places now. 5 ways the coast had chosen to speak. The driftwood token lay beside the sea glass piece for a moment. Wood grain against blue translucence. Then both went back into their places, ready for another day. Nothing about it felt urgent. It felt steady. Before sleep, tea steamed gently in a plain mug. The lemon scent from the conservatory slices lingered in memory. Outside, the harbor moved through its quiet patterns. Inside, the story of the day settled into its drawer with the notebook and the small tokens. Another letter would arrive when it was time. Until then, the town's small kindnesses would keep moving from hand to hand, steady and calm. In the quiet at the end of the day, the leaf mark felt like a reminder that care can grow in sheltered places. The conservatory held warmth without insisting on it. The logbook held requests without judging them. Under green leaves, the route held its symbols without pushing anyone toward an answer. Tomorrow could bring a new seal, or an old stamp, or a note tucked somewhere unexpected. Whatever comes, it will ask for the same thing it always asks for: gentle hands. After the kite string was repaired, the child ran a few steps and let the kite lift gently. It did not jerk. It rose in a steady line as if it trusted the air. A second child held the spool and learned to loosen it with care instead of pulling hard. An older woman watching from a bench said, "That's how you keep a day calm. You don't yank it." Her words were quiet, but they landed. The children nodded as if the advice belonged with the knot lesson. On the way back toward the conservatory, Mara stopped by Market Lane. Most stalls were quieter now. A ribbon end fluttered under an awning. A candle maker was packing jars into a crate with soft thuds instead of sharp ones. The lane smelled faintly of spice and warm cloth. The ribbon woman noticed Mara and lifted a hand in greeting. No talk about the tin. No talk about the trade. Just a look that said, "The day is moving along." In the warm room on the headland, Liza had written one more line in the little booklet. Not a full story. Only a sentence that sounded like someone who knows how to keep a space gentle. Wrap the mugs. Let the room stay kind. Bram had added a small dot beside it like punctuation. Visitors might never see that dot as important. Still, it felt like a mark of agreement. At home, Mara pulled the parcel paper star out of the notebook and checked its folds. The points were softer now. Not ruined, only lived in. Paper does that when it has been carried and opened and returned again. Mara pressed one point between fingers and let the shape settle. Then the star went back into the notebook, and the notebook went back into its place. The route did not require constant handling. It required steady attention when the moment arrived. Under the conservatory panes, a thin rain began, and then ended, without making the day feel heavy. Drops tapped the glass softly, like fingers on a window asking permission to pass. When the tapping stopped, the air smelled cleaner. Citrus leaves looked brighter, as if they had been washed. Jory stepped outside for a minute and looked up at the glass roof. He smiled to himself and said, "Good timing." Then he went back in, content. Near the harbor steps, a fisherman was coiling rope and humming under his breath. The hum was low and steady, similar to the pier's net mender from earlier days. Mara watched long enough to notice the rope was being coiled in a figure 8, not a circle, to keep it from tangling. The fisherman looked up and nodded once. No conversation, only the shared understanding that careful hands make everything easier later. At the post desk, Mrs. Kit sorted letters into 3 piles: town, headland, city. Mara did not ask about the piles. Still, the order felt familiar. Routes have categories, not to separate people, to make sure things arrive where they should. Mrs. Kit said, "The city pile goes out tonight." Then she returned to her work as if that was enough information. Back in the conservatory, the patterned cup was washed and set upside down to dry. Its pale blue leaves looked faded in places, worn from years of use. That wear did not make it less special. It made it trustworthy. The woman who folded napkins said, "That cup has hosted more apologies than tea." Then she smiled, as if apologies are another kind of warmth. Rowan stopped by the conservatory later with a bundle of kindling under his arm. He handed it to Jory without ceremony. Jory thanked him. Rowan nodded as if thanks were optional among people who are simply helping. Rowan glanced at the long table and said, "Good place for notes. Warmth keeps people honest." Then he left the conservatory to its glass light. At the end of the day, Mara opened the notebook and wrote 1 additional line under leaf. Teacup note returned, requests copied, kite string fixed. The line was simple. Still, it made the day feel complete. Completion can be as small as a pencil mark in a margin. In the quiet that followed, the Seaglass token and the driftwood token rested in the same pocket. Cool and warm, smooth and grainy, 2 textures that made the hand notice what it was holding. The coast seemed to like that. Attention through touch, guidance through small contrasts. As night came on, the conservatory windows reflected lamplight and turned the glasshouse into a soft lantern. People walking past slowed down without knowing why. The lane held a gentler pace near that warm glow. Inside, the table waited. The pressed leaf under its edge waited too. Marks under wood do not ask for attention, they simply remain. The conservatory did not feel like a place that produced mysteries. It felt like a place that organized care, a table for tea, a logbook for small requests. By the teacups, a patterned cup for forgotten notes. A leaf mark under wood for those who remember to look. The route had moved from steps to pier to lane to headland, and now to glasshouse. Each stop added a symbol. Each symbol added a kind of instruction. Not to solve, to handle, to return what belongs. Near the post desk, to trade gently, to notice what is offered. When the next letter arrives, it will arrive in the same spirit, quietly, clearly, with the expectation that steady hands will meet it. Later that night, Mara walked once more past the conservatory on the way home from a small errand. The glasshouse looked like a held breath in the dark, warm light behind panes, plants making soft silhouettes. Someone inside was still moving quietly, not late-night bustle, just a person finishing up with care. Jory was at the long table, closing the logbook. He looked up when he noticed Mara at the door and gave a small nod, as if to say the day had been squared away. The woman who folded napkins had stacked them in a neat pile and placed a clean cloth over the kettle tray. She moved slowly, making sure no cup would rattle if the door shifted in the wind. Mara stepped in for a minute, not to search, only to feel the warmth that had carried the day. Jory said it's strange how one little note can change the whole afternoon. He did not mean it dramatically, he meant it practically. A note found means a list gets copied. A list copied means requests get handled. Requests handled means people stop carrying them alone. Mara nodded. That makes sense, she said. It's like clearing a counter. Once it's clear, you can cook. Jory smiled at that. He reached under the table and pulled out a small tin box. Not the lemon tin, a different tin, plain and shallow, used for pencils and bits of string. Inside it were 3 things that looked like they belonged to the route's language. A short spool of twine, a scrap of parcel paper with a clean torn edge. Later that afternoon, a tiny square of blue wax that had been scraped from a saucer earlier and saved without fuss. Jory said, I don't know why I kept that piece of wax. Then he shrugged. Maybe I just liked the leaf. Mara did not tell him about the shell and the star and the drop and the compass hint. That would make the room tilt toward mystery in a way it did not need. Instead, she said, it's a good mark. The tin box went back under the table. The logbook closed with a soft thump that felt more like punctuation than noise. Before leaving, Mara glanced down at the table leg where the leaf mark lived under the edge. It was still there, hidden from anyone who didn't choose to look. Marks like that make a place feel trustworthy. They don't chase you, they simply wait. Outside again, the lane felt cool. The harbor was quiet. The steps waited with their shell mark beneath. Later that afternoon, the pier held its star. Market Lane held its drop. The headland held its compass hint, and the conservatory held its leaf. 5 places, for a moment, 5 symbols, one route that kept turning ordinary kindness into something you could follow. Chapter 7. The Ribbon-Tied Map Corner. The dunes were calm that morning. Wind moved, but it did not shove. It slid over the grasses and let them lean and rise again. Sand held yesterday's footprints in soft dimples, then blurred them gently as the day warmed. By the harbor steps, the rail was cool under a resting hand. The shell mark stayed beneath, unchanged. Steady marks matter when a route grows longer. In the inner pocket of the canvas bag, the Seaglass token rested beside the driftwood piece and the folded letters. The notebook lay flat against them. Inside it, the parcel paper star still lived between pages, softened at the points from being carried and returned. The list of symbols stayed written in the margin like a small map key. Shell, star, drop, compass, leaf. 5 stops, 5 signs. A route that had learned how to speak without raising its voice. At the post desk, Mrs. Kit looked up when Mara stepped inside. Her hands were busy. Twine was being wound into a neat coil. A stack of envelopes waited in a straight line. The bell over the door made its shy sound and then settled. Mrs. Kit did not greet with a long sentence. She simply slid something across the counter. It was not an envelope. It was a torn corner of a map, old paper, thick, faintly yellowed. The edge was not ragged, it had been torn carefully, as if someone had meant to keep the piece clean. A length of ribbon held it closed, blue ribbon, but not the same one that had traveled to the warm room. This ribbon was narrower. It had a faint silver thread that caught light in tiny places, like sea foam caught on rock. At the knot was a seal, not wax this time, a pressed paper seal, pale blue, with an impression that looked like a dune grass blade. A single curved line, under pale sky, a small notch near the bottom, like a leaf's edge, but longer and narrower. Mrs. Kit tapped it once. That's not mine, she said, and it's not modern. Mara looked at the map corner and felt a tension tighten, gentle and clear. "What do you mean?" Mara asked. Mrs. Kit tilted the paper so the light hit it. "Old coastal chart stock," she said. "Made at the city print shop. They changed the paper years ago. This is the old blend. More cotton, more tooth." She paused, then added, "And that ribbon knot is sailor work. Not decorative, practical." Mara smiled faintly at that. Practical felt like the coast's favorite style. There was no return address, no sender, only Mara's name in tidy script on the back of the map corner, written as if the paper had always known where it was going. "Do you want to open it here?" Mrs. Kit asked. Mara shook her head. "Somewhere quiet," she said. Mrs. Kit nodded, as if she approved of that instinct. "Dune trail is open," she said. "Wind is mild, sand is firm, safe walking." Those were the only instructions given out loud. The rest belonged to paper. Outside, the lane led toward the dunes in the same direction it always had. People were moving through town with their small tasks. A shopkeeper brushed a doorstep. A baker carried a tray inside. Near the post desk, a dog found a patch of sun and decided that was enough work for the morning. On the dune trail, the first stretch was packed sand. The path curved with a gentle logic. Grasses stood like quiet sentries, not guarding, only marking where the sand likes to hold its shape. Mara stopped at a low bench near the fence line. The bench was weathered. It did not look new. It looked like it had held many pauses, without complaining. The map corner rested on the bench beside the canvas bag. Fingers untied the ribbon knot carefully. The sailor knot loosened in the way good knots do, releasing without stubbornness when the right move is made. The paper seal lifted with a soft peel. Inside the folded map corner, a note rested. Cream paper, for a moment, thick, tidy handwriting, the same steady hand. "Dear Mara, today the route asks for a safe return. A corner of a map can guide you without showing the whole picture. That is how the coast works. It gives what is needed, not everything at once. Walk the dune trail until you find the old post marker. It is a short wooden post with a flat top, worn smooth by weather. A circle is carved into its side. Near that post, someone left a small parcel tied with ribbon. The parcel is not meant to be taken away. It is meant to be brought back to the right hands. Inside the parcel is a map corner like this one. It belongs to a visitor who panicked when the wind lifted his papers. He ran back to town without looking properly. He thinks it is gone. You will recognize him at the post desk. He wears a tan coat with sand in the cuffs and holds his hat in both hands, as if it might fly away again. His voice stays polite, but his eyes keep checking the door. Return the map corner without making him feel foolish. Offer a safe trade if it helps. A ribbon tie for his bundle. A warm direction for his walk back. After a quiet pause, a steady sentence that lets him breathe again. Afterward, look beneath the old postmarker. There is a mark pressed into the wood there. It will not be the leaf of the conservatory. It will not be the compass hint of the headland. On the dune trail, it will belong to the dunes, with care. A friend of the coast. The note was read twice. First for direction, then for tone. Today the route asks for a safe return. That felt like the heart of it. Not a scavenger hunt, not a test. A return. A way to keep someone from carrying a mistake longer than necessary. Mara folded the letter and slid it into the notebook. The ribbon from the map corner went back into a pocket, kept neat, not tangled. The dune trail continued. Footsteps stayed steady. No rushing, only that calm pace that matches sand and wind. A few minutes on, the old postmarker appeared. It was exactly as described, short, flat-topped, worn smooth by weather. A carved circle on its side, faint but clear when you look closely. Near its base, tucked against the grass, sat a small parcel. It was wrapped in parcel paper, pale brown, the familiar kind. Twine looped around it, and a narrow ribbon tied it shut. A different ribbon again. This one was pale gold, like sunlight trying to be quiet. The knot was simple. The seal was wax, sea blue again, but lighter than usual. as if a little sky had been mixed into it. Pressed into the wax was a shape that looked like a tiny wave and a blade of grass together, a curve with a thin line rising from it. Mara crouched and lifted the parcel carefully. It was light, paper light, map light. Under the postmarker where sand met wood, fingers brushed along the underside of the flat top. There was a pressed mark, not a leaf, not a star, with the tide breathing, not a drop, not a shell, not the compass hint. After a quiet pause, a simple line that suggested motion without drama. A dune mark, a moving mark. Mara traced it once, then stood. The parcel stayed in the bag, protected against the body where it would not bounce. The wind continued to move over grasses, as if it was practicing being gentle. On the walk back, the town came into view in layers. Roof lines, the harbor line, the lighthouse far off, pale against sky. At the post desk, the bell chimed softly again. A man stood near the counter. Tan coat, sand in the cuffs, hat held in both hands. His eyes checked the door, then checked the counter, then checked the small board of notices as if he was trying to find a lost thing by sheer concentration. Mrs. Kit did not look impatient. She looked steady. Mara approached quietly, from the side, so the man would not feel surprised. The man turned. Relief flickered and then held back, cautious, as if he did not want to assume good news. "Yes," he said. "I think I have something that belongs to you," Mara said. The parcel came out and rested on the counter with care. The man's hands hovered. He did not grab. He did not snatch. By the fence line, he simply stared at the wax seal as if it might disappear if he blinked too hard. "My map," he said, and the words came out like an exhale. "It was near the dunes," Mara said, "by an old postmarker." He closed his eyes for a second. "I was there," he said. "I had it. The wind lifted the papers and I thought I lost everything. I ran back like an idiot." Mara shook her head. "Wind is good at grabbing corners," she said. "It doesn't mean you did anything wrong." That sentence loosened something in his shoulders. He opened the parcel slowly. Inside was a folded map corner. Not the same one Mara had opened on the bench. A different corner. This one showed a bend in the dune's path, and a small drawn circle where the old postmarker stood. The man smiled, small and tired. "I marked that," he said, "so I could walk back without worrying." "Then it did its job," Mara said. He looked at the ribbon tie. "This is not mine," he said. "It was on the parcel," Mara replied, "but you can keep it. It ties well." The letter had said, "Offer a safe trade if it helps." Mara reached into the pocket and pulled out the blue ribbon from the first map corner, the narrow one with faint silver thread. "This one is yours too," Mara said. "It was tied around another corner of your map. It may help you bundle the pages." The man's eyes widened. He took it with care, like a person receiving something that saves a day from unraveling. "That is," he started, then stopped, searching for the right word. "Practical," Mrs. Kit supplied without smiling, but her eyes softened. The man laughed quietly. "For a moment, yes," he said. "Practical and kind." He held the ribbon and began to tie his map bundle with it. His fingers shook less as he worked. Mara offered one more thing, a warm direction, a steady sentence. "If you walk the dune trail again," Mara said, "stop at the bench near the fence line. It's a good place to pause. The path curves gently after that. It will bring you back." The man nodded. He looked less like he might bolt out the door. "Thank you," he said. "Truly." Mara nodded back. No big response. No need for it. Mrs. Kit slid a small card across the counter. "The dunes are safe today," she told him. "For a moment wind is mild, for a moment sand is firm. Slow steps." The man took the card as if it was a gift. Then he took his bundle of map pages and tucked the ribbon knot in tight. Before he left, he said, "My name is Cal," like offering proof that this exchange was real. "Mara," she replied. Cal blinked, then smiled. "Of course," he said, as if the town had already told him. The bell chimed softly as he stepped out. The post desk returned to its usual quiet. Mrs. Kit looked at Mara and said, "Safe return," as if acknowledging the day's purpose without making it bigger than it was. Mara nodded. Yes, she said. Outside, the harbor steps waited, and the rail felt cool again under a resting hand. The shell mark stayed beneath, steady as ever. Back at home, the notebook opened to the symbols page. For a moment shell, for a moment star, with the tide breathing, for a moment drop, for a moment compass, for a moment leaf, wave, 6 stops now, 6 signs. The route was not only collecting marks, it was collecting returns, a tin back to its owner, a stamp plate back to its box, by the harbor steps, a note back to the logbook, a map corner back to calm hands. The Seaglass token sat in the pocket as usual. The driftwood token rested beside it. 2 tokens, 2 textures, 1 story moving forward through small recoveries. In the evening, the narrow blue ribbon with silver thread lay on the table for a moment, then was tucked into the notebook, not to hoard, to keep it safe until it was needed again. A map corner can guide you without showing the whole picture. That sentence stayed. The coast did not give everything at once. It gave enough for the next safe step. Tomorrow would bring another nudge, or it would bring quiet. Either way, the route would remain steady, and the town would keep its habit of returning what belongs with gentle hands. Later that afternoon, Mara walked Market Lane and noticed how many people tie things the way they talk. A ribbon knot at the stall looked like a small promise kept. A string around a parcel looked like a thought that didn't want to spill out. The ribbon woman glanced up and nodded once, as if she could tell the day had gone well. No questions came. No reports were demanded. Market Lane has a way of letting kindness stand on its own. On the harbor side, Elias was wiping his counter with a clean cloth. He looked up and said, "Dunes Day, not a question, an observation." For a moment, Mara nodded. Elias set a small paper bag on the counter. Inside were 2 plain biscuits, the steady kind that travel well. For later, Elias said, "Not as a trade, just because." The bag went into the canvas pocket and stayed there until evening, when it was opened and shared with tea. At the conservatory, Jory had copied the last of the requests into the back pages and then added 1 line of his own. Bench by the fence line is a good place to pause. He wrote it in small letters, and the sentence looked like it belonged among watering notes and window checks. The conservatory's leaf mark stayed pressed under the table edge. Marks under wood do not ask to be noticed. They simply remain. On the headland, the warm room door was closed that day, but a towel still hung on the hook outside. It looked like a small sign that care continues even when the room is not open. The lighthouse tower stood steady against sky, quiet as ever. The route held that steadiness too. Open days, closed days, safe steps either way. At night, the map corner from Mrs. Kitt's counter rested in the notebook for a moment. Its paper held a faint smell of salt and drawer wood, like old charts stored carefully. The pale gold ribbon from the parcel was folded and tucked beside the earlier blue ribbon. 2 ribbons, 2 knots, both useful, both meant to prevent pages from lifting and scattering. That seemed like the Dunes lesson. Hold corners kindly. Let the wind be wind without letting it take everything. In the quiet at the end of the day, the wave mark felt like a reminder that movement can be gentle, but they do not need to frighten anyone. A route can shift and still be safe if it is marked with care. The coast's notes kept asking for the same thing in different forms. Return what belongs, offer a trade that protects dignity, leave a place steadier than you found it. Tomorrow, another letter would arrive when it was time, and steady hands would meet it again. Later that day, Mara walked the dune trail again, not because anything was missing, but because the route felt clearer when it was retraced gently. The bench by the fence line held a little warmth now. Someone had sat there earlier and left the slightest impression in sand beside it. A gull watched from a distance and then turned away, uninterested in quiet human routines. In the pocket, the pale gold ribbon from the parcel stayed folded and neat. The ribbon did not feel like a prize. It felt like a tool, a way to keep pages together when wind decides to be playful. Wind can be playful without being cruel. That was part of the day's lesson. At the edge of town, the ribbon woman was tying ends into bow knots again. He did it quickly, practiced fingers turning ribbon into order. The knot held. Then it released when asked. That is what makes a knot trustworthy. Mara noticed the skill and said, "Good knot." The ribbon woman smiled and said, "Good day." No other words were needed. Trades do not always need receipts when respect is clear. Near the harbor, Elias was kneading dough with slow pressure. The bakery smelled steady, like warmth that does not shout. Elias looked up and nodded once, as if he could tell the route had added another stop. He set a small paper packet on the counter. Inside was a thin piece of parchment and a pencil stub. "For maps," Elias said. "People forget they can draw their own calm." Mara thanked him and tucked the packet into the canvas bag. It felt like another kind of direction, offered without insistence. By the conservatory, the glass panes held late afternoon light and turned it into a soft glow. Jory was at the long table, copying one new note into the back pages. It was a small request. A visitor wanted to know which path stays safest when wind shifts. Jory wrote a simple answer and then drew a small wave mark beside it. Not official, not fancy, just a reminder that the dunes move and people can still return safely if they pay attention. Mara saw the wave mark and felt the route tighten into something more connected. Marks were traveling now, not only appearing. On the headland path, the warm room door was closed, but a towel still hung on its hook outside. The towel looked freshly folded, as if Lisa had left it there on purpose. A person could see it and think, someone is still caring for this place even when it is quiet. Bram's small dot in the booklet returned to mind, that quiet punctuation of agreement. A warm room can stay warm in memory too. Back at home, the notebook opened to the map corner page. The paper corner sat flat. The blue ribbon with silver thread lay beside it like a bookmark. After a quiet pause, the pale gold ribbon rested nearby, folded once. Mara added one line beneath wave. Safe return. Map corner delivered. Dune mark found. The line was plain. Still, it made the day feel finished. In the evening, the harbor steps held their calm. The rail stayed cool. For a moment, the shell marks stayed beneath. A fisherman coiled rope into a figure 8 to keep it from tangling. Watching that careful shape made the map corner story feel even more fitting. Corners are where tangles start. Corners are also where things can be held together. The route seemed interested in corners lately, in places where care matters most. Near the post desk notice board, Mrs. Kit pinned a simple card. Found, map corner, returned. The handwriting was his. Under pale sky, the town liked practical. A small line beneath it read, Dune trail safe today. Wind mild. Bench by fence line is a good pause. Cal would see it. Other visitors would see it. Routes become safer when knowledge is shared without pride. Later that night, the Seaglass token sat on the windowsill for a minute and caught lamplight. Blue deepened at its center. Edges stayed pale. Glass does that when it is honest. The driftwood token warmed nearby and kept its heat longer than expected. Wood does that when it has been held. For a moment, 2 tokens. For a moment, 2 textures. One route made out of returning what belongs. In the quiet between tasks, Mara thought about Cal's face when the parcel landed on the counter. Relief first, then a little embarrassment, then calm. That is what a safe return does. It gives the body permission to stop bracing. It gives the day a chance to become ordinary again. The coast seemed to favor that kind of ending. On the dune trail, the old post marker would keep standing. Weather would smooth it more each season. The wave mark beneath would stay pressed into its underside, hidden from careless hands. It would be there for the next person who chooses to look, not as a trick, but as a quiet sign. The route does not demand attention. It rewards care. By the end of the evening, the ribbons were tucked away where they could be found again. The map corners were stacked neatly inside the notebook. The letters sat behind them, a small archive of gentle instructions. Nothing felt solved. Everything felt held. That was enough for a night. In the end, the dunes did not ask anyone to be brave. They asked for attention, for slow steps, for a hand on a fence post if needed. Near the headland turn for a pause on a bench when wind shifts. A map corner can be enough when it points you toward a safe return. A ribbon tie can be enough when it keeps pages from lifting. Near the headland turn, a steady sentence can be enough when it keeps a person from turning a mistake into shame. That is what the coast keeps teaching. Care is not dramatic. Care is practical. Along the sand path, care is repeatable. Under pale sky, Cal returned to the dunes later with his map bundle held tight under one arm. He walked more slowly this time. He paused at the bench near the fence line and sat for a minute as if practicing being calm. When wind lifted a corner, his hand moved to it without panic. He smoothed the paper and smiled, small and private. A person can learn a place in one afternoon, not all at once, only enough to return safely. By the fence line, a weathered board held small marks from years of visitors. Not names, not big declarations, just little scratches where someone had leaned a pencil while tying a knot. Mara touched the board lightly and felt how the grain held the pressure of many hands. It made the map corner feel less lonely. Paper is not the only thing that can remember. Wood does too. Near the old post marker, someone had left a small pebble beside the base, pale and smooth. It looked like a placeholder, the way people mark a page in a book. The pebble was not a clue to collect. It was a sign that someone wanted the marker to be noticed. Mara left the pebble where it was. Leaving the world arranged is sometimes the kindest choice. At the edge of town, Mrs. Kit watched Cal walk away with his bundle tucked under his arm. She did not wave. She did not call. By the harbor steps, she only nodded once, satisfied, as if a ledger line had been closed in her mind. When Mara met her eyes, Mrs. Kit said, "Good return." 2 words, a full ending. At home, the notebook opened again, and the map corner was placed beside the list of symbols. It showed a bend in the dune trail, a drawn circle, a small note in the margin that read, "Bench." Different from the coast's tidy script, more hurried, more human. That made it feel honest. Mara pressed the paper flat with a palm, and then let it be. Paper does not need to be held down forever. It only needs to be held long enough to calm. Later that evening, a thin layer of fog rolled in and softened the harbor lights. The fog did not hide anything. It only blurred edges, the way sand blurs footprints. That softening matched the day's theme. Corners held, the stakes released, roots returned. The Seaglass token caught a little lamplight and looked deeper at its center. It felt like the coast's quiet approval. On the dune trail, grass blades made small hissing sounds as wind moved through them. The sound was steady, not sharp. It was the kind of sound that keeps a person from feeling alone on a path. Mara listened for a minute and then kept walking, letting the sound travel behind like a gentle escort. Near the pier, the net mender was at his usual spot, fingers working with patient rhythm. Mara watched him loop a strand and then tighten it, the same way a good knot tightens without cutting the rope. The thought returned. A ribbon tie is not a decoration. It is a promise that pages will not scatter, That felt like the whole arc in one small object. At the conservatory, Jory set a small bowl of pebbles on the long table. He labeled it Dune Markers. He did not explain it to anyone. Toward evening, he simply made it available. Visitors could take one pebble and leave one pebble, a trade of steady attention. That was how routes get kinder over time. Small systems, quiet help. Before sleep, the 2 ribbons from the day were tucked into the notebook, blue with silver thread, pale gold with a calm sheen. They lay flat, not tangled, as if they had agreed to rest. Tomorrow might ask them to travel again. Tonight, that was sufficient that they were safe. In the quiet after the dunes, the town felt steadier. Not because anything huge had changed, because one person's worry had been returned to the size it belonged. A map corner found, a bundle tied. By the window, a route walked again without panic. The coast keeps choosing these endings. Safe returns, soft trades, small repairs that let a day continue. Later, when the house was quiet, Mara set the map corner on the table and studied the drawn bend in the trail. It was not an artist's drawing. It was a practical mark, made by someone who wanted to return without guessing. The small circle at the postmarker looked like a promise that the route can be followed again. Mara folded the map corner carefully and tied it once with the narrow ribbon, not to seal it away, only to keep the pages from lifting. Then the corner went back into the notebook, and the notebook went back into its drawer. A safe return deserves a safe resting place. Chapter 8. The Mailbag on the Bench. The harbor bench was empty when the morning began. Wood slats were cool. Salt air moved through them. A thin line of sun lay across the seat like a quiet invitation. On the pier boards, the sea kept its steady conversation with stone. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden, just tide moving in and out with patient rhythm. At the harbor steps, the rail waited with its familiar coolness. The shell marks stayed beneath, unchanged. Near the post desk, Mrs. Kit was already sorting paper. 3 piles sat in front of her, town, headland, and city. She looked up when Mara stepped inside. "Today," Mrs. Kit said, "you will find a mailbag on the bench." That was all. No envelope, no stamp, no wax seal on her counter. Only that sentence, as if the coast had decided to use the town's oldest habit. A route delivered through a person who knows how to keep it calm. Mara nodded and stepped back out into the lane. At the harbor bench, the mailbag was there. Canvas, weathered, stitched in places where time had rubbed it thin. A leather strap looped over the backrest as if someone had placed it carefully so it would not slide. The bag had a tag tied to the handle with twine. No name on the tag, only a small stamp impression in pale blue ink. A shell, a star, a drop, a compass hint, a leaf, a wave, all 6 symbols printed in a tidy row like a quiet inventory. Under them was one new mark, a small bench outline, 2 short lines for slats, a simple shape that made the bench unmistakable. Mara touched the tag with 2 fingers. Paper, ink, no drama, just clear instruction. The bag was not locked. It was not heavy either. It felt like it carried paper and small objects, nothing more. Mara lifted it and carried it home. Inside the kitchen, the kettle was set on the stove, not boiling, just warming. A plain mug waited on the table. The mailbag rested on a chair beside the table. Its flap opened with a simple tug. No stubborn buckles, no tricks. Inside were envelopes. Not dozens, not a flood. 7 envelopes stacked neatly and tied with pale gold ribbon. The ribbon knot was sailor work again, practical, easy to release when you know how. On the top envelope was a wax seal, sea blue, as always, but lighter than it had been on the dunes. The impression was a bench. Under the bench shape was a tiny mark that looked like a bakery loaf, a simple oval with one cut line on top. The handwriting on the envelope was tidy and steady. Mara's name, no sender. The envelope opened with a careful pull. Inside was a single letter and a small packet wrapped in parcel paper. The letter was read first. Dear Mara, this is the last nudge for this route. Thank you for carrying it. You have returned what belonged. You have offered trades that protected dignity. You have followed marks without forcing them to become fear. The mailbag on the bench is not a trick. It is a thank you. The letters have had no sender, because the sender is not one person. The sender is a small circle of people who keep the town's gentle places running. Mrs. Kit and the others, Elias, Ansel, Lysa, Bram, Jory, and Rowan, they did not plan a performance. They simply noticed you. They noticed how you move through the town, how you carry what is placed in your hands, how you return things without making anyone feel small. This began because a visitor once left the post desk in tears after losing a parcel. You stayed late that day. You helped him retrace his steps. You did not announce it. You only returned the parcel to his hands and let his shoulders drop. Mrs. Kit remembered. So did the rest of us. We wanted to give you something back. Not a prize, a route, a set of small errands that would lead you through the town's warm rooms and steady hands, so you could feel what you have been giving to others. We used old stamps, old plates, and little marks because that is how we speak to each other when we want tear to travel quietly. We chose symbols because symbols can be found without being announced. Today, open the parcel paper packet. Inside is a key to the route. Not a key for a door, a key for a map. It will show you all the marks in one place, so you can look at them and smile, and then set them down when you are tired. After that, take the other envelopes in the bag to their owners. Each one holds a small thank you, nothing heavy, just sweetness and warmth, and proof that your care landed. When you are done, come back to the harbor bench at sunset. Someone will be there. There will be tea. There will be lemon drops. There will be a warm roll. There will be a place saved for you. With care, your town Mara sat with the letter for a moment. The reveal did not feel loud. It felt fitting. The parcel paper packet waited. Mara opened it gently. Inside was a folded map. A full map made from the same old coastal chart stock Mrs. Kit had noticed. It was hand-annotated. 6 symbols were drawn along a route line. Shell at the harbor steps. Star at the pier. Drop at Market Lane. Compass hint at the lighthouse warm room. Leaf at the conservatory table. Wave at the dune post marker. A 7th mark sat at the center. A bench outline. Under it, in small neat letters, was one word: homecoming. The map included small notes in the margins, written in different hands. Mrs. Kit's handwriting was sharp and clean. Elias's was rounder. Ansel's looked like careful printing. Lysa's slanted slightly. Bram's was minimal, almost just dots and short words. Jory's was patient, like someone who writes slowly. Rowan's note was the simplest. You are not alone on this route. Mara exhaled, then the next step arrived. Before the deliveries began, Mara took a pencil and copied the map's route line into the notebook. Not the whole chart, only the simple thread that connected the 6 marks to the bench. A route line can be comforting when it is written down. The mailbag held more than paper. It held small, practical items tucked between envelopes, as if each thank you wanted to arrive with something you could use. A tiny roll of twine sat in the corner of the bag. A packet of thin tea biscuits was wrapped in wax paper. A small strip of blue cloth, cut cleanly, was folded like a bookmark. And at the very bottom, a Seaglass chip the color of pale sky waited inside a scrap of parcel paper. None of it looked expensive. All of it looked chosen. Mara set those items on the table in a neat line. Then the first envelope for the post desk was placed on top, ready to return to the hands that had started the route. The route had always been simple. Pick something up, carry it, return it, leave the next place steadier than you found it. only with a softer ending waiting at sunset. Mara closed the mailbag, looped the strap over a shoulder, and stepped back out into town. Deliver the other envelopes. The mailbag held 6 more, each labeled with a name. Mrs. Kit, Elias, Ansel, Lisa, Bram, Jory, and Rowan. 1 for each of them. Return what belongs. The first stop was the post desk. Mrs. Kit looked up as Mara approached the counter. An envelope slid forward. The wax seal on it was a tiny shell and a tiny bench side by side. This is yours, Mara said. Mrs. Kit took it without ceremony. She read the name on the front, then the seal, and her eyes softened. She said. A receipt. Mara smiled. A thank you, she replied. Mrs. Kit nodded once. That will do, she said, and she put the envelope into her drawer, like it belonged there. Mrs. Kit's hand paused on the drawer handle. Then she opened it again and slid out a small card. On it was the benchmark, stamped in pale blue. Under the stamp was a short note in her sharp handwriting. Come back at sunset. Do not skip this. The card went into Mara's pocket. A new instruction. A forward push. Gentle but firm. Next was the bakery. Elias was pulling warm rolls from the oven. The smell was steady and kind. His envelope waited in Mara's hand. Its seal was a loaf and a small wave. Elias looked at it, then laughed softly. Caught, he said. Yes, Mara said. Elias tucked it onto the shelf behind the counter. Good, he said, because I meant every roll I ever handed you. The bookstall came next. Ansel took his envelope with a nod. Its seal was a tiny star and a leaf, like paper and sky had agreed to share a mark. Ansel ran a thumb over the seal and said, Old paper has a long memory. Then he put it into his ledger, as if it was a note about inventory. Ansel slid a thin strip of matte paper across the counter. It was blank on one side, and printed faintly with old grid lines on the other. Extra, he said, for when you need to draw the route for someone who's new. Mara ran a fingertip over the grid. Old paper has a feel to it. It holds pencil marks with patience. The strip folded into the notebook pocket, ready for the next person who might need a calm direction. At the conservatory, Jory's hands were damp from rinsing cups. He dried them on his apron, then took the envelope carefully. Its seal was a leaf and a pencil line. A note for a note keeper. Jory smiled, tired but light. I didn't think anyone noticed me, he said. Mara shook her head. You made the room safe, she said. That gets noticed. Jory's shoulders lowered. He tucked the envelope into the logbook without saying more. Jory opened the envelope just enough to peek at the first line. Then he laughed, surprised at himself. It's a recipe, he said, for lemon tea. The woman who had been folding napkins looked over and smiled. She said, Of course it is. Everything comes back to tea in here. Jory folded the paper again carefully and tucked it beside the back pages where the kindness requests lived. A thank you placed where it could do more than sit in a drawer. Rowan's place was next. Rowan opened the door as if he expected the knock. He took his envelope and looked at the seal, a simple benchmark and a pine needle line. Rowan said, Good work. Then he added, Now you go sit. Rowan stepped back inside for a moment and returned with a small parcel wrapped in plain paper. He held it out without explaining it first. Bench blanket, he said. Inside was a folded piece of soft cloth, dark and sturdy, the kind people keep near doors for windy evenings. No embroidery, no flourish, only usefulness. Rowan tied it with twine in a knot that would release easily. Then he handed it to Mara as if it was the most normal thing in the world, to prepare for a sunset sit-down. The last 2 were for the headland. The warm room was open today. Lisa and Bram were there. Mugs sat in cloth wraps. Towels waited. The kettle ticked softly. Mara handed Lysa her envelope first. Its seal was a towel hook and a compass hint. Lysa laughed and pressed it to her chest for a second. Then she set it down and said, "All right, sit." Bram took his envelope next. Its seal was a dot and a window latch, a little joke made in wax. Bram raised his eyebrows, amused. "Accurate," he said. Lysa poured a small sample cup of tea right then, as if the warm room could not help itself. The cup was wrapped in cloth. The sip was clean and steady. "You look like you've been carrying a lot," Lysa said. "It was a good carry," Mara replied. Bram nodded toward the mailbag strap. "Good routes end with a safe set-down," he said. Then he touched the window latch gently, as if to prove he had learned his lesson. Now the deliveries were done. The route's last instruction remained: return to the harbor bench at sunset. Before heading to the bench, Mara took one more lap through town, following the map not as a puzzle, but as a way to close the circle properly. At the harbor steps, the rail cooled the palm again. The shell mark stayed beneath. It didn't ask for attention. It simply reminded her where the route began. From there, the pier was an easy walk. Net lines hung to dry in neat arcs, and the boards felt firm underfoot. The star mark was still hidden under the rail, and Mara didn't linger. The day had taught her when to look and when to keep moving. Market Lane was next. Stalls were in the middle of their own quiet rhythm. Awnings were being loosened. Crates were being stacked. Twine was being cut to length with careful fingers. The ribbon woman saw Mara and lifted a hand. No dramatic smile, just recognition. The ribbon woman set a small spool of pale thread on the counter and said, "For mending corners." Then the spool was wrapped in paper and placed into Mara's bag as if it belonged there. At the bakery, Elias was already arranging tomorrow's flour sacks. He looked up, saw the mailbag strap, and said, "You've got the rounds." Not a question, a gentle acknowledgement. Elias added one more thing to the bag, a small paper-wrapped piece of citrus peel candy. Not sticky, not loud, just bright enough to remind a person that sweetness can be practical too. The bookstall was quieter now. Ansel was closing a ledger and sliding postcards into their box. Mara showed him the map for a second. Ansel's eyes moved over the symbols without surprise. Then he pointed to the benchmark in the center and said, "That's the right center for this town." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. At the conservatory, the glass panes held late afternoon light and turned it into a soft lantern. Jory was at the long table, closing the logbook. When Mara entered, Jory's shoulders dropped, as if he already understood what the day was doing. Jory said, "The back pages are clear." Then he added, "A person can think better when the list is copied." Mara nodded because it was true in a plain, ordinary way. Jory reached under the table and brought out a small tin. Not a gift tin, a working tin. Inside was the blue wax scrap with the leaf impression from the teacup saucer, kept without fuss. Next to it was a tiny square of parcel paper folded into a pocket. Inside the pocket sat a pale piece of sea glass, lighter than Mara's token, almost sky-colored. Jory held it out. "This was left on the table," Jory said. "Someone said it should go back to you at the end." Mara took the little sea glass chip and turned it once. The surface was frosted. It felt like a smaller echo of the route's first token. Mara didn't put it with the main sea glass piece yet. It went into the notebook, tucked behind the map like a quiet postscript. On the hill, Rowan's place was steady in the way it always was. Rowan met Mara at the door and asked one question: "Sunset time?" "Yes," Ara said. Rowan nodded. Then he pointed at the bag. "You don't need to carry that any farther than the bench," Rowan said. "A practical instruction, a boundary made of care." From Rowan's place, the path toward the dunes felt familiar. The headland was visible beyond, pale against sky. The warm room would open its door, then close again, like a breath. At the warm room, Lysa and Bram were finishing their own preparations. Mugs were wrapped, towels were folded, the kettle sat ready. Lysa smiled when Mara walked in and said, "You're on schedule." Bram made a small dot in the booklet, as if the dot was a way of saying, "Yes, this is the right day." Mara didn't stay long. The route had one last stop, and it was waiting where wood slats met salt air. On the way down, the dune trail was calm. Grasses leaned and rose. A person could walk it without bracing. That felt like a safe return, not only for Cal's map corner, but for the whole arc. Mara walked down the dune path and into town as the day softened. Sun moved lower. Market Lane packed up with gentle thuds. The pier boards cooled. The harbor steps held their shell mark beneath the rail, unchanged. At the harbor bench, the mailbag was gone. In its place was a small tray on the bench. A kettle. 2 mugs wrapped in cloth. A small dish of lemon drops. A warm roll split in half. 1 extra napkin folded into a tidy square. Mrs. Kit sat at one end of the bench, posture straight. Elias leaned against the rail nearby, arms folded, expression soft. Ansel stood with his hands in his pockets, pleased without showing off. Jory was there, pencil behind his ear. Lysa and Bram sat close, warm room calm in their faces. Rowan stood a little apart, like a steady fence post. No one clapped, no one made it a ceremony. They behaved like people who work in gentle places. They didn't announce themselves. They simply made space. Mrs. Kit set the kettle down first, centered and steady. Elias placed the lemon drop tin beside it and loosened the lid so it would open quietly. Ansel set the blank postcard down and slid a pencil toward it. Jory unfolded a clean cloth and laid it under the map so the paper would not snag on the bench slats. Lysa adjusted the mug wraps so nothing would clink. Bram tucked the extra napkin closer, within easy reach. Rowan set the folded bench blanket at the far end and nodded as if to say, "If wind comes, we are ready." Then everyone waited for Mara to sit before anyone took a sip. When Mara sat, the bench felt different than it had at the start of the route. Not because the wood had changed, because the bench had been chosen. A place becomes safer when it is claimed by care. Mrs. Kit poured tea into the first mug and set it down in front of Mara. The pour was steady. The kettle never rattled. Mrs. Kit had built a whole life out of quiet steadiness. Elias broke the warm roll in half again and offered one side. The bread was soft in the middle and crisp at the edges. Elias said, "Eat first," not as a command, as a practical kindness. Lysa slid the lemon drops closer and said, "These are for sharing, not for counting." Bram nodded at that and added, "Sharing keeps things simple." Then Bram looked at Mrs. Kit and corrected himself with a tiny smile. "Sharing keeps things clear." Jory opened the map and smoothed the corners with the flat of a hand. Ansel watched the paper and said, "That chart stock holds pencil, like it was made for it." Then Ansel held out the blank postcard and the pencil stub. "Write 1 line," Ansel said, "not for an audience, for the drawer." Mara looked down at the postcard. The day had already been full. Still, the request felt easy. It felt like the right final step. Mara wrote 1 sentence. "I will keep returning what belongs." The pencil left a clean mark. No extra flourish, just a promise. Mrs. Kit leaned in and looked at the postcard, then nodded once. "That will do," Mrs. Kit said. It sounded like approval and closure at the same time. Rowan watched the seam without trying to take it over. Then Rowan unfolded the bench blanket and laid it across the slats. The cloth took the chill out of the wood without turning it into something precious. Rowan said, "Wind doesn't get the last word. It was Rowan's version of comfort. Practical and strong. At that moment, someone new approached the bench. Cal. Tan coat. Less sand in the cuffs now. Hat still in both hands, but the grip was softer. Cal stopped a few steps away, unsure if he was interrupting. Elias noticed first, and lifted a hand in greeting. Ansel shifted to make room. Lysa slid a mug wrap a little farther down the bench. A place was made without anyone announcing it. Cal stepped closer and said, "I saw the notice." Then Cal added, "Thank you." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Mrs. Kit looked at Cal and said, "Sit." It was the same tone Mrs. Kit used for everyone on a day that matters. Cal sat. Cal looked at Mara and said, "I walked the dune trail again." Then Cal laughed softly, embarrassed at how much that meant to him. "I didn't run," Cal said. "I stopped at the bench by the fence line, like you said." Cal's shoulders lowered as he spoke, as if the sentence itself was a release. Mara nodded. "That's a good walk," Mara said. "Dunes are easier when you let them be dunes." Cal reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded corner of paper. Not the map corner, a different piece. It was a small map key, hand-drawn, 7 symbols: shell, star, drop, compass hint, leaf, wave, bench. Cal had copied them with careful lines. Cal held it out. "I made this for myself," Cal said, "so I don't forget how to get back." Cal hesitated, then added, "If you want it, you can keep it." The offering was small and sincere, a return gift made by hand. Mara took the map key and looked at the careful lines. The handwriting was not like the tidy letter hand. It was Cal's. It was human. That made it a perfect addition. Jory leaned over and said, "That belongs in the logbook too." Then Jory smiled, not as a request, as a reminder. Cal's face softened. He nodded. Ansel set the map key beside the chart on the bench and said, "See?" Ansel tapped the bench mark at the center. "That's the right center." Elias opened the lemon tin and offered a drop to Cal. Cal took it, still holding his hat in his lap, and the citrus sweetness changed his expression. The shift was small. It mattered. Lysa turned to Mara and said, "You've been giving the town a steady place to land." Lysa didn't make it sentimental. Lysa made it true in the most practical way. "When people don't feel judged, they come back," Lysa said. "That's how places stay alive." Bram nodded and added one sentence, short and honest. "Consistency is comfort." Mrs. Kit listened to that and said, "Correct." Then Mrs. Kit looked at Mara and said, "You did the work." Not in a heroic way, in the way a person acknowledges a job completed. Rowan didn't speak for a moment. Then Rowan said, "And now you rest." It was the same instruction Rowan had given earlier. The sun lowered. Light softened on the water. The harbor breathed. As the last warm band of light touched the bench slats, Mara reached into the notebook and took out the small sky-colored Seaglass chip Jory had returned. It was pale and gentle, like morning fog in solid form. Mara set it on the map, right at the benchmark. "Maybe this one stays here," Mara said. "Not lost, not taken, just placed." Mrs. Kit watched the chip and then nodded once. "A marker," Mrs. Kit said. Cal smiled at that, because it sounded like the dunes. Ansel smiled too, because it sounded like old books. Elias smiled, because it sounded like a practical way to keep a promise visible. Lysa and Bram smiled, because it sounded like a warm room idea translated to outside air. Jory smiled, because it sounded like a note that didn't need ink. Rowan smiled last, small and private, like someone who approves and does not need to show it. When the tea was finished, Mrs. Kit collected the mugs and wrapped them again. Elias tucked the remaining lemon drops back into the tin. Ansel slid the postcard into Mara's notebook with the pencil stub. Jory folded the chart carefully and tied it with the pale gold ribbon snug without strain. Rowan lifted the bench blanket and folded it once, then handed it back. Nothing was taken away from the bench except what needed to travel. The sky-colored Seaglass chip stayed, a small mark at the center. As people stood and returned to their places, the bench felt like a quiet anchor. Not a stage, not a monument, just a place the root could return to again and again without having to invent new reasons. Mara walked home with the notebook tucked under one arm. The Seaglass token stayed cool in the pocket. The map sat behind the letters. Cal's hand-drawn key sat beside it. At the door, Mara paused and looked back toward the harbor. The bench was a shape in the fading light. The Seaglass chip would catch moonlight later, a small point of pale glow. Inside, the notebook went into its drawer. The day ended the way it began, with a place saved. Mrs. Kit poured tea. Elias handed over the warm roll. Lysa slid the lemon drops closer. Jory placed the map on the bench between everyone, open to the homecoming mark. Ansel set a blank postcard beside it, as if inviting the next story to be written someday. Rowan looked at Mara and said, "You carried the route. Now you let it carry you." Mara sat. Tea warmed hands. Lemon drops tasted like sunlight. The harbor kept breathing. The bench held steady. This was the sweet reveal. Not that the letters had a sender, but that care had witnesses. The town had been watching the way Mara watched others, and the town had decided to return that attention gently, without making it heavy. When the sun lowered toward the water, Mrs. Kit folded the map and tied it with the pale gold ribbon. Then the map was handed back. "Keep it," Mrs. Kit said. "For days you forget you belong here." Mara nodded. The route had ended, but it did not disappear. It became what it always had been, a habit of returning what belongs, a circle of small trades, a bench that holds a person when the day has been long. When the last light softened, everyone went back to their places: post desk, bakery, bookstall, conservatory, warm room, Pine Hill. Mara walked home with the map in the notebook and the Seaglass token cool in the pocket. The mailbag on the bench was gone. The homecoming remained. Before bed, Mara opened Ansel's blank postcard. One sentence was written, not for the public notice board, but for the drawer where the letters lived. "Next time someone loses a corner, we will return it together." The postcard slid into the notebook behind the map, not as a new mystery, as a continuation of the town's habit. Inside, the root rested. Tomorrow would be an ordinary day again, and that was the best kind of ending. Later that night, Mara set the folded map into the notebook behind the earlier letters. The edges of the old chart stock felt solid. It felt like something meant to be kept, not as a relic, but as a reminder. A small pencil note was added under homecoming: bench tea, sweet reveal, town is sender. Then the notebook closed and the drawer closed. The day was finished. The root was safely stored. In the morning, the harbor would look the same. Still, Mara would walk through it differently. The bench would no longer feel like a random place to stop. It would feel like part of a circle, held by people who notice.